Hello, everyone, and good morning, almost afternoon. My name is Maddie Allen, and I am the Advocacy Manager here at the Center for Public Justice. The Center for Public Justice is a national, nonpartisan Christian public policy and civic engagement organization. Our mission is to equip citizens, develop leaders, and shape policy, all in the pursuit of our purpose to serve God, advance justice, and transform public life. CPJ's works on a variety of public policy issues that includes criminal and juvenile justice reform. As a part of this work, over the last 4 years, CPJ has identified juvenile justice and juvenile probation reform as a policy reform priority. Within our juvenile probation reform priority work, we've brought together over 100 faith and community leaders and organizations thus far via virtual convenings, Instagram Lives, and other special events. Our goal has been to educate and inform them about juvenile probation reform efforts and credible messenger programs, and to also offer very practical ways in which they can get involved in juvenile probation reform work in their own communities. CPJ believes that faith-based organizations and houses of worship are critical to this work, and CPJ is invested in inspiring and equipping such institutions to be a part of transforming juvenile probation in their own communities. For this specific juvenile justice convening, we are honing in and highlighting the stories, perspectives, and voices of faith and community leaders who are doing impactful diversion work and building restorative relationships with youth across the country. This work is providing opportunities for youth to have alternatives to experiencing the embarrassment of criminalization of court trials, incarceration, and probation, and also providing restorative relationship for youth who have already been involved in the courts or the formal justice system. We're hoping these relationships are formed with youth and with their families to help youth positively change the trajectory of their lives. Relationships are essential for all people, but especially for youth who are just in the beginning phases of their lives, still navigating the complexity of living. The formal justice system can often take youth out of the core relationships that help youth flourish by removing them from their communities. Many of the organizations, faith communities, and pastors gathered today want to help build relationships with these youth and help restore the relationships they've lost due to incarceration and probation. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really excited for the conversation that we have ahead of us. As you are joining, we welcome you to put your name, what organization or church you are representing today, and where you're joining us from in the chat. We'd love to know. We represent people all across the country, and we'd love to know where you're coming from. And just to give you a little overview of what we'll be doing today during today's convening, we will first have a short interview with one of our speakers, who's a pastor leading diversion efforts in Illinois. And then we'll follow with a panel of how faith leaders and nonprofits can collaborate together in this work. And then we'll take a short break. And then come back together for a presentation of CPJ and Community Connections for Youth Juvenile Justice Toolkit, which I'm very excited for, and we'll have a lot of practical tools, so you definitely do not want to miss that. And then finally, we will end with our panel on the essential role of positive relationships and justice. There will be an opportunity after every one of these panels to ask questions, so please feel free to add your questions to the chat throughout the convening today, and we will see if we can get some answers to those questions. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm just really excited that you're here and get to be a part of these conversations. So I'm just going to quickly introduce our first guest speaker. So Pastor Greg Morrison is the head pastor of Gateway Family Church and is the president of Juvenile Diversion Services and has been with that organization since 2009. We are so excited to have Pastor Greg with us and hear about the diversion work he has been faithfully doing. I'm going to ask him to quickly open us in prayer, and then we will get started.
All right. Thank you so much for having us, and it's an honor, and we look forward to it. So, Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus. We just thank you, Lord, for your wisdom, your guidance, Lord, your compassion. To each and every one that's gathered here right now, Lord, we just thank you. We open up our hearts and our minds, Lord. And we just thank you for the navigation and the increase, Lord, of seeing the relationships and families restored for the advancement of your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Great. Okay, well, I am so excited to hear from you, but Pastor Greg, could you just first tell us a little bit how you got involved with youth justice and diversion work, and tell us about the work that you're currently doing?
Sure, sure. Thank you. So we started in 2009, pretty much taking over diversion uh, program that was kind of already on Lifeline uh, on its last leg. And oftentimes, when it comes to churches or ministries, we are easily offended by the separation of church and state. And it's easy for us to be more upset about it than doing something about it. And what we love about the diversion is actually church and state working together. And instead of a faith based just being at a place of offense, it's really the challenge of the faith based ministries to step up and bring a solution to a problem that's there. And so we either have the opportunity to be offended or be able to raise our hand and say, how can we serve and how can we help? And in 2009, obviously the recession is just was during a time of through that, and our county in specific, the judge that was over the juvenile department had already said, had been quoted that he won't have a diversion program for whatever reason, I don't know. But because of the recession, they were laying off different officers and programs that were just struggling. And so we were able to step up and say, we have something better than washing police cars and some community service things that maybe can do. We have a 6-month mentorship program, and we don't charge anything for it. We do it absolutely for free. So here it is, where our local government would definitely not have a hard time with agreeing to upgrade an issue for the juvenile justice system in our county, but then for it to be free. So we see a solution to a problem to be able to come in to actually serve our city, serve our community. And I think that that has been one of the biggest issues with ministry losing its influence in today's culture, was because ministry was no longer offering a solution to serving practical problems in our community. And so that's what we did in 2009. I was the youth pastor at the time, just a youth pastor that had a passion to reach teenagers. And it was one of those things that one thing leading to another, obviously God leading in ways that have taken over this in 2009. And here we are. I got gray hair on the side of my head, no longer a youth pastor, but still working with the judge, the court systems, in our city, and really trying to pour into some families that are going through some hard and struggling times in their life. And so that's how it all started back then, in 2009, and today. To be able to work with the chief of police, the state's attorney, the judges, is just wonderful to be able to be a part and be in the relationship with the leaders of our community. And it's what allows us to have influence, because we're there to help, we're there to serve. And so a lot of our community service hours that we do, so juvenile diversion, for those that it's a 6-month mentorship program where the judge sentences these teenagers. There's some guidelines of usually a first time offense. It's nothing like a felony, for this diversion program that we have established. But it ranges from everything from drinking at the football game, fighting in school, to stealing at Kohl's or Walmart. There's a vast variety of issues of why they're in the program. But to have a judge sentencing a student to a faith-based mentorship program is just phenomenal. The heart's desire. I know of all of us as faith-based ministries, that's our desire, is to work with church and state together and let them see not so much about what we're against or what we don't believe in, but what are we here to serve? How can we help? And we have a solution, and we're going to serve with the best of our ability. We have a great conglomerate of volunteers through all these years. Obviously, because of the ministry that we're a part of, they see the heart behind what we're doing, and so they're there to pour into the love of God. And then we also are building the relationships with community leaders that we have come speak to our kids, um, business leaders, to entrepreneurs, banks, teaching kids just how to budget, to the whole gambit of things that we cover in that 6 month program. And we kind of in each program, we will rearrange it to the needs of the students that are in. So it's not necessarily a set program that we do every 6 months. We do review the cases that we're working with, the families that we're working with, and try to plug in, obviously, the professionals and that we have lined up that are able to speak to those situations. And so it's a great thing building relationships with business leaders, with our justice leaders, and it's just been such a blessing to be able to be a part of that. And I with a community service that we do to help out anything with the going on in the city as well. And by the end of it, the students don't have to pay the fine that they would have received through the court systems. We charge a $50 fee to go through the program, which doesn't cover the cost by any means. It's just to have a little skin in the game. And there's obviously some families, if they can't afford it, it's we don't necessarily require it, obviously, but and so that's pretty much what they're coming through for community service, and they're going to go through that 6 months program, and then the charges are dropped from so they're able to have a clean start to help them if they want to go in the military, obviously to the universities, whatever route they go, so they have a clean record.
Yeah, wow, that's so amazing. I love hearing just all the partnerships and collaboration that you've been able to have. I think that's such a testament to the work.
Yeah,
But I'm really curious too, thinking about 2009. Now we're in 2000, 2023.
right.
Yeah, it's a long journey. What have you seen change so much in like the landscape between those two
Okay.
times?
That's a great question, and I will tell you, unfortunately, so we're in a suburb of St. Louis, and I was born and raised in St. Louis. Did not realize how dangerous St. Louis was until I traveled to other cities. But obviously, St. Louis is on the news on a regular basis. But we are living the Illinois side of the suburb. Um, and ironically enough, we saw a shift in the mentality of the teenagers that I cannot pinpoint it. Unfortunately, the series Breaking Bad was that series on TV where you begin to root for the bad guy, that an adult can watch a TV show and navigate through it. But it almost like inspired when we take our youth through the program. There's just been such a shift to whether they wanted at one time to move to Colorado to start their own marijuana business, but now Illinois has opened up its doors as well to legalization, to the parameters of medical marijuana. But um, beyond what was popular on a TV show. And when they would come in, we'd say, okay, what's your vision? We're trying to work with them to dream. Let's write down your vision, your purpose that you want to do, and literally begin to see a shift of wanting to go into the industry of, I mean, I guess it's great that it was legal, but with drugs in reference to that. And it wasn't long after that show. To me, it was just my personal preference. I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. Obviously, again, we've been doing this for quite a few years, but the internet has not been a help to whatever they can Google, YouTube, TikTok, whatever they can find on there. But we have just seen such a change just in the thinking of a teenager, the response, and especially Um, you would think, but from 2009 to current 2023, we've only had one family that complained that was in a church throughout all of these years, and they took their. She was a cheerleader that got in trouble at a party, but through all these years, only one person complained that it was in a church. Now, I'm sure maybe others, maybe they didn't care for it per se, but they didn't complain about it or really raise their voice about it. Um, but just the mentality. A lot of our students that are coming through these doors, they don't go to church. They come from broken families, single parent homes. Grandparents are raising them. So. It could be the very first time they've stepped inside of a church building, and with the connotation that the the Hollywood or whatever paints of church and ministers is never good, and so they come in with the bias, you know, that goes against the grain of what they think, and so we're breaking down the barriers. That here we are, volunteers. We love you. We're not expecting anything out of you, but just the mentality from 2009 on, we begin to just see the shift in their thought process, what they thought of everything, with the cultural wars that are raging from political to, sexual identity to all these all these things that are wrapped up into it. That you do see that the battlefield has changed through the years, by all means.
Yeah, I'm curious talking about it being in a church. We have pastors who, when they hear about just the issues that are currently happening in the juvenile justice world, and their hearts are just grieved for a broken justice system, and want to know how to get their church involved and want to know like what they can do. I think they're always curious about like how do you get your church involved? How do you encourage your congregants to be passionate about this? And so I was wondering, what does that look like in a church partnership here, and how has your church partnered with juvenile diversion?
That's a wonderful question, and so we actually started the boys club. Uh, had not the boys club. I'm sorry. Um, oh my goodness, the where they go camping. But
Boy Scouts.
thank
Yeah.
you. So that's how we started. There was actually through the Boy Scouts, they had some type of a diversion. When we started looking to help in this type of area, and that's how we got started. But then we actually just took over one that a church was doing. We've also done diversion in a city, a neighboring city that wasn't in a church, but for in a church you definitely, obviously, I would recommend starting with the youth pastor, right? Because that youth pastor already has a heart for youth. And so you're going to need to have somebody that's all in, somebody that doesn't care if there's a hole punched in the wall. It's never happened for us, but I'm just saying, you got to know that kind of comes with the territory. If there's damage done or something, that you take care of it. It's a part of the process of ministry. And once the youth pastor, who I would recommend, or whoever your leader is that brings it to you as a pastor, as the church, you have somebody that's ready to run with it. But you want the backing of the youth ministry for the support. I mean, obviously, the goal is once they've gone through a mentorship program, that they built the relationships, they know it's a safe place, and that they would continue to build relationships with the youth ministry that's based there in that local area. Yeah, partnering. Obviously, you're gonna find your people that have a compassion for youth ministry, and meeting with them, to where obviously if you have more of a traditional route, we're a non-denominational ministry, and so I know that there are some denominations that would have to go through different board meetings and things to get things cleared, but you're definitely going to be finding the youth minister, the people who will then cast the vision for what we do and why we do it. We still have parents or grandparents that are part of the food process. We provide food at every one of our meetings for our students, whether it's pizza, sandwiches, whatever. We've got this one lady that's brought tamales, but we do all sorts of different types of things. But we have grandmas that bake cookies, and there's still teenagers that love cookies just as much as a little kid ever would, but you do have those volunteers for being able to be a part. And we have not experienced any issues of theft or vandalism whatsoever. But when I said that, it's just you have to be ready or prepared that when you open your doors, anything can happen. We've been very blessed to not experience those things, but to be able to work together. I think it's pretty much here's something that really spoke to me back many years ago. I was listening on the radio, a Focus on the Family, don't even recall who it was, but they said, if the doors of your church were closed tomorrow, would your city even know or miss you? And I thought, ouch, man, that just really, really hurt, because obviously your church families would, but what about your city? And so for a pastor in a ministry, you're that lighthouse in the dark place. You're going to open up your doors to those that need it the most, with kids going through a rebellious stage or just in a bad situation. And so that builds that compassion to say, we're going to be here. We're going to volunteer. You don't get a lot of pat on the back on your backs, but that's not why you do it. From 2009 to now, I've had one father that came back and bought us shovels for our community service and rakes and said thank you. But that was only one dad in all of these years, So you know why you're doing it. And you've got the vision, like you said, casting the vision to your volunteers. We've had some of our core volunteers that have been with us since 2009, but that's also because I was a youth pastor, right? It's still on my heart. Even though I'm not the youth pastor, I'm still going to the meetings. I'm still at the courthouse at graduation. We do a graduation every time at the courthouse before the judge, the state's attorney. We have wonderful, Madison County is wonderful at standing behind the diversion program. So because obviously of my relationship with the program has been, to be able to bring that influence to those in the church that really stand with it, as understanding the focus and the reason for the ministry behind it.
Yeah, wow. I think that is a great question to ask ourselves
Yes.
and all faith-based organizations to really think about what is the impact of what you're doing, especially when it comes to some of the most vulnerable youth, and how are we supporting and helping those families. And I think that question really leads well into my next question, which is, when you started in 2009, you had a lot of relationships there that you were trying to form between, with attorneys and judges and from the government perspective, and then also I'm sure community members and community organization. When you started coming forward as as a religious organization, as a faith-based organization, what was the response back like there? Was it welcoming
Oh,
or
very,
yeah?
very welcome. Very welcoming. Matter of fact, one of the great things, not all of our speakers are coming from a faith-based background, but I will say most of them are. Okay. So, all right, I'm a pastor, I'm in a church, but I don't preach to the kids. It's not the time that I give a sermon to them. So that's another reason when we talk about, I'm going to respect and honor to the fact, we built a relationship with our city, and they know if they get a complaint that we're trying to convert their child or brainwash their, whatever the case may be, they're going to be able to go back to our relationship and see how we've walked with respect and honor, and reference to that. That being said, we are the ones that control the speakers, so we are very, uh, you know, we are bringing in speakers that come, for the most part, not all of them, but most of them are faith based. And although me as a pastor, I'm not going to be able to necessarily give them a sermon, our speakers are able to tell their story and what's worked for them. Right. So they're going to have a story of what they've come through, the challenges, making bad decisions, and the turnaround in their life. And they have the ability to say, in my case or in my experience, what really helped me in my turnaround is my relationship with God. So that's where that comes. I mean, we're hitting all the topics of being practical, of what you're putting on social media. Don't be sexting. Don't be sending pictures, to how to fill out a job application, getting a vision for your life, how to budget your money, right? We're going through all these practical things, but we are going to have the person that came through and said, I was an alcoholic until I battled with drugs, until I, people that have spent time in prison until, and that until is obviously a relationship with God that's touched their life. So that's where we're able to bring in the faith base to it. We're covering the practical side of everything that needs to be, but we are definitely proactive in making sure that with those speakers that they are bringing the message that is going to be ultimately faith and mixed with the success of their turnaround from making bad choices. We're not a scared straight program. We always tell them that. But we've always had a welcoming, because a lot of these business leaders that are coming in are coming from a faith-based as well. Not all of them, again, not all, but most are. So it's been very welcoming. Even though, for instance, I didn't realize our state's attorney was Catholic. So I made a joke in court, I have 5 children and I'm not Catholic, just as a joke, because today someone having 5 children sounds ridiculous, but at least in our area. But the state's attorney gets up and he goes, well, I can't remember how many children he has. He goes, but I am Catholic. It's just the joking going around, different denominations working together. And it's a wonderful thing, but it's always been welcome. We've not felt any pushback because we're a faith-based Christian organization that's leading the way in juvenile diversion.
Yeah. Okay. So I think just to wrap up, and I would love to hear, like we said, this has been going on for a while. You've been just faithfully working at this. What are some of your biggest wins, as a juvenile diversion program?
We had a guy that uh, just had a really terrible home life that went through. He was with fighting. He was in the program because of fighting in school, but was able to come through the program. Went on to university, obviously heading for his life for success. And there's been plenty of stories of that. I do want to say this. This is just this year, so it's fresh on my heart. Anna comes into our program. She was a cheerleader as well. She's a cheerleader. She's a cheerleader. When she comes in the life of the room, she carries an atmosphere. Um, and I don't even remember why she was in, but after going through our program, St. Louis University is one of the top universities, obviously, in our area. She got accepted at SLU, St. Louis University, and she chose to study justice. And she's going into justice, which is just such a the words of encouragement she said to us. And she had 2 weeks before graduation, and unfortunately, her parents found her in her bedroom where she had passed away the night before. And you go from this extreme joy and excitement. She really had done all the right things, but unfortunately, is had involved with fentanyl as what took her life. And she had such an incredible future ahead of her, already accepted into a prestigious university in our city, wanting to study in justice. And I don't know why that it got to the point to where she was taking that particular time. But it really pierces our heart for the reason why we have to do what we do. And again, this girl wasn't from the wrong side of the tracks. She's a cheerleader on dance team, already accepted into university. She had an actually incredible, strong family. And unfortunately, tragedy goes on both sides of the tracks. It doesn't matter where you're from, what address, it hits everywhere. And this is why we must do what we do. We've had other students come back. We've had students that are still coming right now that have been coming for years. They've gone through the program and they come back. It's like they're part of the family. We have students come back and speak to our students. So there's incredible wins along the way. But even in the losses, pierces our heart to say, will you do it for just one? And, you know, if there is anybody that was ever interested in wanting to start to do this in their community, by all means, we would be available to help somebody, walk them through, and come along beside them to answer questions and point them in the right direction, as well, if that's something that they ever had on their heart that they wanted to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And yeah, especially for that invitation at the end there. I think so many people and pastors in particular want to know how that they can help and just don't know where to start. So we really appreciate all you have to share. And we're gonna transition now to one of our first panels, which is talking about building relationships and collaboration with other faith-based organizations, leaders, and churches. Like we've already talked about, we know that communities of faith really are essential for youth. They're usually already a part of their lives before they ever became involved in the justice system. And they know their communities very well instead of having a ton of outside organizations. But we've also seen historically where how easy it is for churches, different nonprofits, organizations to get stuck in a silo and not work together and not collaborate, and not figure out how best to communicate. So I'm happy to have Pastor Greg as well as Clinton Lacey joining us. Clint is the president and CEO of the Credible Messenger Mentoring Movement, which focuses on supporting credible messenger mentors who share similar life experiences with current justice-involved young people. CM3 works around the nation to advance credible messenger initiatives. Previously, Clinton served as director of the District of Columbia Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services and Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Probation Department. We are so thankful to have Clint join us as an experienced trainer, writer, keynote speaker on issues such as racial disparities, comprehensive reentry services, gang intervention strategies, and overall youth development. Welcome. So happy that you're here to join us. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
really excited to hear what you both have to say. So, we got to hear a lot about Greg's work, but Clint, would you be willing to just share us a little bit about how you first got involved working within the youth justice realm, and a little bit about the work that you do at Credible Messengers 3?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with the distinguished panel and distinguished audience of participants. Honored to be invited to the conversation. I started my work in the youth justice space back in the 90s, working with youth at Rikers Island. And at that point, I was second person hired in this little tiny nonprofit called Friends of Island Academy, working with young people. And at Rikers Island at that point in the 93, there were 20,000 people on Rikers and 4,000 of them were called adolescents, essentially 16 to 18 years old. And so our organization was established to serve young people. And we particularly focus on those who were transitioning back home into the community. And so we started out, my job initially was to go out to Rikers Island to meet the young people there and then recruit them to come to our organization in the community, right? And so again, it was two of us sharing a desk. We didn't have a lot, but we began to serve young people through relationships, right? So I think that's like this word is so central, and connections to try to address comprehensive needs. And over the years, the organization would grow. One thing I wanted to share about that early point in my work, and I think which is still foundational to everything that I've continued to do or, been a part of, was as I would go out to the jail and meet with young people and talk to them about, try to provide some context as to why they were there, what were some of the historical, social, economic drivers, institutionalized racism, et cetera, that was perpetuating what was then commonly called the prison industrial complex, and that they were part of that. And then to describe to them that there could be some opportunity for them when they came home. Like, we didn't have a lot of money or resources, but as I said, we have relationships and we had love and understanding. And so we did talk to them about housing and, or listen to them, their needs, housing, employment, health, behavioral health, right? On down the list of needs that still impact our communities and just as impacted young people. I share all of that to say I've spent a lot of time working with them to come, but the question that young people would consistently ask when they were about to be released, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to meet you Monday or Thursday when you come, and the main question they would ask, it wasn't, are you going to get me a job? And it wasn't, I need a place to live. It wasn't, I have conflicts with people. I have beef on the streets. I don't know what's going to happen to me. Like all of these really critically important issues wasn't the question they asked. The question that they would consistently ask when we would set up the time for them to when they were released to come see us was, are you going to be there? When I come, will you be there? And that to me speaks to, and has continued to speak to me and speaks to the work that it's about. Yeah, it's about services. It's definitely about resources. There's no question about it. People have a great need and have been suffering disparities. But at the heart and soul of it is what everybody on this call here today knows, that it's about relationship. Will you be there? Like, so through relationship, we can get to those other things. They knew that, right? The young people themselves. And so I just wanted to share that. Over the years, I would work with the W. Hayward Burns Institute, addressing racial and ethnic disparities around the country, visiting jurisdictions around the country, and usually absent from the table of reform, which often had well-intended people there, system leaders, et cetera, was the families and the youth themselves, right? The voice of the community. And so a lot of our work at Burns was about building space and bridging systems efforts, right, with community work. And so prominent in that work from the very beginning were communities of faith and faith leaders, right? Which of course is, the tradition in marginalized communities. We know that, right? The Black and brown communities in particular. And so it's not an accident that while there was perhaps too great a gap, and still is perhaps in some sectors of the faith community who, are not perhaps connected or intentional enough, but there always were several people. Last thing that I just wanted to say in terms of just sort of leading into and answering your question about how that leads to the work that we're doing now, my point is trying to make is that relationship, faith leaders, faith communities has always been like a part of this work that we're doing and that I've been involved in. By 2011, I was recruited to become Deputy Commissioner of Probation Department in New York City. I had not been a probation officer or worked inside government. I had always been on the other side of the equation as an advocate, as a direct service provider, et cetera. And I think that was the reason why Vinny Schiraldi recruited me. He wanted someone with a community perspective to come to a high level of such an organization, which had a history of harm, as the justice system has overall, to try to bring a perspective, a community perspective to the work of probation and to redefine the culture. And I just wanted to say that really, as we launched Archer's Transformative Mentoring, which is really the precursor to Credible Messenger, what we began to call Credible Messenger, we were standing on the shoulders of a group of men and women who I think are a part of a relatively untold story in New York City in particular, that these folks in prison had developed a relationship with universities, New York Theological Seminary being one prominent member. And so there was a generation of folks who came out of prison with master's degrees, MDivs, right, who came in and were faith leaders who started organizations in New York City. Julio Medina and other folks like that started these organizations. And so this idea of credible messenger, right, of the wounded healer, right, as Henri Nouwen writes about, right, that these folks who had suffered the depths of disparity and the justice system, and had been involved in such things, had through their own restoration and redemption and healing, were now these powerful leaders. And so that's really such a foundation to the work that would ultimately define, so much of my professional and personal life. And so we started Arch's Transformative Mentoring in New York, great success, achieving a 60% reduction in recidivism. Went to DC, became director of DC's youth justice system, where we continued this work of investing in the community, the answer being in the community, and trying to refashion our system to be facilitators and capacity builders and investors, but knowing that the true answer, the solution, the medicine, the cure were in the community, and not just in the community, but in the places where we always thought that was just a place of despair and pathology, but those very folks who had experienced that became such powerful leaders. And so it was on the heels of this work, 4 years in New York, 6 years in DC, again, experiencing a 50% reduction in recidivism. And beyond the statistic was the demonstration of the viability and the worthiness and the need to invest in community and in impacted people to lead this work. Again, prominent always in New York, in DC, and now nationally, since we've launched CM3, have been communities of faith who are standing on, I think, the question here today in this conversation on relationships, that the currency of this work, we need money, we need funds, that's real, but the ultimate currency is our relationships. And so that's sort of like an overview of our walk to this process as we're expanding credible messenger work around the country, helping various jurisdictions and community organizations begin to invest in and rely on impacted folks who have stories of restoration and redemption, to be the leaders of helping to engage and heal and restore our young people.
Wow. First of all, I just want to congratulate you and thank you for your entire career of just wonderful service. And as you were saying those things, I mean, from the 90s to now, that is truly an amazing accomplishment. And I'm so grateful for the way you've been consistent and showed up for the youth in the way that you have. So thank you. And thank you for sharing that. I really think you touched upon so many things that we really want to get on. And one of those is I love this emphasis on the solution being in the community. But then also we have the struggle of where's the power and where's policy and happening, and they're not always bringing members to the community to the table when having those policy conversations or in the courtroom. And so how have you seen collaborations happen between community, whether that be nonprofits, faith community?
I don't know if it froze.
It looks like it.
I think so. But I think if everyone can hear, maybe I'll start to answer the question. Yeah. And we'll continue. Well, I just was in Houston last week. I think it was last week. I'm kind of blurred on days now. And Annie Casey Foundation had its Juvenile Detentions Alternative Initiative, JDAI conference in Houston. Yeah, it froze up a little bit, but I think I got the question. Cool. And it was all about system community relationships, right? And so one of the key sort of themes for the conference was, or statements or affirmations was, that change, and I would substitute for change or add to that, authentic, productive relationships are required ingredient for change, moves at the speed of trust, right? That was one of the affirmations. And so building trusting relationships is very difficult, particularly in a society where we know the roots of our justice system in this country, is born out of, segregation, slavery, social control, white supremacy. Like we can name these sort of factors, these forces, right, that have been permeating our society from its very roots, right? And so those issues have been present. And so as we have begun to really reform and move from a paradigm of social control, right, and punishment, right, through the hard work of many people on this call and others to shift to not punishing people, right, not controlling people, but healing, restoration, and empowerment. As we move in that direction, it's a struggle for systems to see them, not just see the community as a source of answers and worthy of partnership, right, but to see themselves in a different light, to redefine their identity, not as the people, place, and apparatus that must fix people and control this situation and make our community safe, because we know police and courts and prisons cannot do that alone. That in fact, it is communities themselves that will make communities safe, right? And so that there must be this investment and partnership to reimagine and recreate what we think of justice, of public safety, et cetera. And so having those hard conversations and getting system leaders and others to reposition, to utilize the data, the facts of what we see of a failed model, and lift up the narrative and the stories and the data and the statistics of what community can do, what credible messengers can do, what faith organizations can do to contribute to building whole people, whole communities, restoring people, running alternative to incarceration programs, reentry programs, help prevention programs, even going inside of prisons and places of incarceration to bring healing and hope and restoration. So that's a hard sell, but it's growing. And it's growing, I think, not just through the demonstration of the effectiveness, because sometimes that's not enough, right? Because when people are living in fear, the statistics, the economic argument, none of that really seems to move things very well. So we think that ultimately it does come down to certainly organizing people and mobilizing and advocacy, but it comes down to relationships, to communication, to being in the room with people. So one of the things that we did in DC, in New York, our credible messenger work was we were in charge of the department. We ordered our probation officers to refer young people to the credible messenger groups, and they did individual work, and it was an amazing outcome. And DC, we, on the heels on that, standing on that work, what we learned, we took it a step further. And we knew that we couldn't train our way into authentic relationships, right? That doesn't happen in a training room. It's not in the curriculum. Training is great, right? And we have a curriculum, but we knew we had to put people in the room together, right? And not just in workshops, but in real life situations. So we moved credible messengers in with us into the agency to be at the table, to be in discussions, to help make decisions, to do something that's really frightening for systems, to share some power, to share some space in decision-making authority, right? To trust that community partners could, in fact, be trusted, right? And not marginalized and seen as problems, but seen as solutions. And so this is an ongoing struggle for sure. This was the heart of the conversation in Houston and the heart of conversation around the country. But the hope, I think, is that people are leaning into it. And it's painful, right? For some, it's scary. But at the end of the day, this is exactly the question that I think is the fundamental question in terms of youth justice, of building trusting relationships that we can build upon solutions that actually work. But it's going to require people to give up something, right? But we believe through actual engagement, real, authentic, creating a safe space for actual engagement, some real talk, even if it's uncomfortable, right? Some truth and reconciliation, right? That we can get to a place where we can have authentic relationships that ultimately end up benefiting and creating a paradigm that's based on healing, restoration, and empowerment, and not based on social control and punishment.
Amen. That is so good. And I think really touching upon too, I appreciate that you said, yeah, well, giving, sometimes we have to give up something and we lose something. We have to sacrifice some of those power to have the conversations at these tables. And I think that's true of just relationships, of being in a relationship with each other. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be uncomfortable. There's certain elements of sacrifice and hardship that just our day-to-day relationships require of us. And I think that's what makes it so beautifully human. But, Greg, as a pastor, I feel like it's very relevant to talk about this relational part of youth justice, and when it comes to building long-lasting relationships that are not just transactional, or feel like, oh, I think some youth can feel often from a church perspective or from a faith perspective like they're a project, and it's not a real relationship. How has your organization kind of approached that type of issue?
No, I think that he hit it so much right on the head, that speaks so much to this topic. When the response is, "Are you going to be there?" Man, that was powerful, and that is what relationship is. Number one, they're used to not having somebody be there. They're used to feeling like they're alone or up against and not knowing what to do. And I think that's what I love. Everything that you said was incredible. I mean, yeah, we do have curriculum, we do have that, but it goes so much beyond that. So when it comes to those relationships of just being there for somebody, and when it's that sacrifice, that means you're going to sacrifice. We do Thursday nights. On Thursday night, we're going to sacrifice that family time or whatever I would be doing on that night, because I'm going to walk into a room, and we know teenagers can throw an attitude like nobody else. And uh, coming from not all, but a lot of problems, dysfunctional family institutions, to where your parents aren't going to be thankful for what you're doing, but you're doing it because you're saying, I'm building a relationship that I am going to be there. And so when I obviously that has to be the lead in our volunteers of knowing why we do. And it's something that has to be recasted on a regular basis. But just like when I shared Anna's story, that literally just happened just 2 months ago. I'm standing up doing her memorial service for the community that you would never think. And those are the things that we have to rise above. Jude uh, says in verse 22, some having compassion, making a difference. And I don't know why it's only some, but I know the reason why each and every one of you guys are on this meeting call right now is because you have the compassion to do it. And it's being able to forecast the compassion, what makes your heart pump, why you want to do, taking the stories of some of the experiences. When he said, "Are you going to be there?" Because I would have thought they're going to be asking all these other questions. Like right now in our current mentorship program, we have someone coming in with grief counseling, mental health, because we have a majority of our students that have already battled suicidal thoughts and those situations. Um, Hopeless situations, hopeless feelings, and they just need to know, is somebody going to be there? And the relationships is what it's all about. And the volunteers will always follow the lead of the leader, right? I'm not expecting the volunteers to do something that I'm not going to do. And that's showing up on the community service, and we're out there working in the community service, and the teenagers don't have a good attitude. They're not happy to be there, and that's where some of our best relationships are built, when we're pulling up our shirt sleeves and doing something for something in the community outside of a classroom setting, or whatever topic that's going to be discussed. It's that building of relationships. And I don't know how it could have been explained any better than what he just had described as, are you going to be there? And I think that's where we have to show up. saying that we will be there for these people in our community that we're reaching out to. I mean, I kind of just sound like I'm repeating what he said when I'm saying it. I don't think it could be said any better than that. So it's all about relationships by all means. It is all about relationships, and that's what's going to take. What's going to make it successful in the lives of these people that are being changed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is such a testimony to why it is so important for um, you know, places of faith and communities to be involved here, because relationships is something that our court systems will never be able to give juveniles, and it's never going to be a place where there can be any transformative relationships formed. So I think that's why it's so important for, the church to step up and people of faith to step up here. But I'm curious to what, Clinton, what are some of the biggest barriers you feel when it comes to working collaboratively, whether that be with other nonprofits, other organizations, formalized, justice systems, or, communities of faith? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I look back in our training and developmental work with credible messengers. We start the conversation. We start the conversation by talking about love as the highest principle, the highest idea, the highest power. And quoting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "True justice is an act of love." Right. In public, in policy, and so that it's love that we're standing on. And so at DYRS, I always joke, well, it's not really a joke, it's true. I came out, I didn't feel, I wasn't brave enough, I guess, in New York to come out and say love. It was a pretty toxic organization, probation was at that point. And we began to try to move it forward. And so, but by the time we got to DC, we just came on out, we came out and revealed what we were really about, right? And we said, we're going to build this justice agency and our work on the principle of love. We thought it was a little controversial in New York, but, we just finally said, let the chips fall where they may. And I say that because the mantra for us became, well, what does love look like? Right? It's beyond just saying the word, right? How does it translate into a policy practice and experience, and not just of the people who we say we love, the youth, the marginalized young people who we serve, but amongst each other, right? How does that manifest in our actions? How do we build trust amongst each other? And so there was this big system community question that you raised that we went through, but even amongst the community, we shouldn't assume, and you certainly don't, and we know that there's unity. And so really standing on that, or pointing to that as the North Star, trying to build trusting relationships amongst organizations that are doing this work, so we move from that in our training and talk about the history. We say we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We talk about people's organizations, movements, that this work, credible messenger work, this community work is not like behavior modification. It's not just trying to reform the justice system. Like, this is an ongoing struggle for civil and human rights, right? We're part of a legacy of work of Dr. King and countless others, right? And so I say all that because now the movement has kind of changed, right? It's sort of the 501c3, right? It's nonprofit, it's grants. So we're fighting over money to keep our programs open, to keep the lights on. And we need funding to pay people so they can put food on the table. There's no question about it. But I feel like the paradigm, because there were struggles amongst organizations in the 60s, in the past, not to mention exacerbated by, agent provocateurs and counterintelligence program and other things that were deliberately done to split up various organizations that were, united around a common goal. So that happens, right? Sabotage, we know that. But so it was not to try to say that everything was perfect back in the civil rights movement, but just to say, like, there is something to learn from that era. And so now we've been sort of compartmentalized into our various organizations. And so it kind of has pitted organizations against each other to try to struggle for the same dollars to stay alive, right? And then you have divides. You have the direct service folks who try to do housing and healthcare, and sometimes our community organizers who are screaming, shut it down, tear it down, right? Legitimately so, are at odds with the people who are taking dollars from the system. So there's all these divides, right? Right? Who's too radical, who's sold out, who's taking money from whom, like all of this. And it even has sadly descended to the point of quote unquote credible messengers on the ground beefing with each other, at odds with each other over turf, right? And I'm like, the peacemakers can't fight each other, but that's what's happened. So on varying levels, right? From the streets to the organizational struggles that we know about that can be really fierce. And so that wasn't an answer. I guess I just described the problem a bit more, but which is all to say there has to be a call for unity. There has to be collaborative effort, right? And one of the missions, and CM3, we're not grandiose to think that we're just going to solve all of this, but we want to be we see part of our mission as helping to build that unity, right? To build that to be part of building that with others, right? To come together in a united front of various faiths, right? Of various particular angles to addressing this work, to stand united, right? To begin to collectively demand, acquire, and share resources. And so I think it's going to take leadership. And I think this conversation about relationships and communities and leaders of faith is central to how we're going to get there. We have to call this out. We have to build unity amongst ourselves before we can successfully hold any system accountable to do the right thing by us.
Yeah. Amen. I'm so glad that you described that and said that, because I think that we all know, if you work in the nonprofit space, if you work in this, like, what that's like to compete for the grant dollars. It is. And I think we're all scared to say it sometimes and talk about how actually hard that is. And it's one of the reasons that's the heart behind why the Center for Public Justice really sees these convenings as essential, because we are the exact people that need to have each other's, be each other's support system, learn from each other, grow with each other instead of against each other. And sometimes it's great when you learn about an organization that's doing something perfectly, or like in a really, great way, and you go, okay, well, maybe I figure out what we can do really well and do it differently in a different way, so that you're not just all trying to compete for the same exact resources and the same thing. So I'm so grateful that you said that and can speak to it, because I think a lot of people on this call felt that, resonated with it deeply. And I will say too, for our audience, those listening, I'm about to ask our final question for this panel. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll have some time to go through those. But I wanted to give y'all a couple of minutes. So just for our final question, this is for both Greg and Clinton. Could you just share, like, what's your vision, what's your hope for the future of your organization? And it doesn't have to be like long term, because I think long term, most of our vision is to never see another youth or juvenile in prison, but what are your next steps and goals, and how can people be praying for and hoping that those work out for you? I don't know who would prefer to go first. But
Greg, I'll yield.
Okay. We are currently establishing our juvenile diversion, what we're doing in our city. And we've just, in the past 2 months, launched another city. And when you talked about collaboration, it's with another church, right? It's not, us trying to do it. And when I say another city, it's 15 minutes down the road. I should say another town or community, So That's been going strong for 2 months, and it's in January. We're going to be able to take our volunteers that have helped establish it, be able to step back for them to run with it, full force. And then we also have another neighboring community, 20 minutes in the other direction, that in the spring they had to be put on hold. We're looking to relaunch one there as well, in this coming year of 2024 in the fall. And so we, for years, have just done it through the church, but as just this year, we've developed our own 501c3 just for the diversion program, separate from the church. Incredible. One of our main core leaders was one of the originals, and Dwayne is amazing, from another church in our same area. So it is important realizing that love goes to work together for everybody involved, not just my church or not just So our goal is, we're expanding in our county to 3 cities. We have an amazing, Barb has retired. She worked corporate at the offices for Panera Bread Company. And so now that she's retired, she's the one taking this lead. And it was herself that went through, she had a rebellious child. So this spoke strong to her heart, the diversion program. And that rebellious child today works in the state. She is an assistant state's attorney, a part of the program. So you just talk about a complete thing. But because of that, now that she's retired, she is really putting together the ability to put more time behind the scenes of the expansion of our diversion program from just the area where we've been since 2009 to 2 other local communities that don't have a diversion program there as well. And then we also are across the river in North County in Missouri in the St. Louis area. And we have the ability as well. But right now, just expansion of and staying in our county, expanding it. And then, as you just discussed, we currently have a couple of grants that are, written up to, we have never received any type of funding other from within for our program. So that was a new stepping out, the reason for having our own 501c3 and getting some grants written up to see what avenues could help there as well, because of wanting to expand the diversion program to more volunteers, to more cities, to make it something that reaches out more.
Great. That's awesome, Greg. And
Yeah.
congratulations. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Hey, Clinton, I'm turning to you
Yeah.
next.
Yeah, and congratulations. Yes, that's awesome and inspiring listening to you speak about the expanding work. So we started CM3 based on our experiences, and during the course of work, we were meeting with credible messengers and folks of various names. Like, not everyone referred to themselves as such, but people impacted directly, marginalized people and communities who were leaning in to this work. We did a convening in 2018 and brought in 200 people from around the country and another 100 here in DC, and that really was sort of the space where we had this vision and this idea to launch CM3, because we were meeting our brothers and sisters around the country, and just a relative small group in terms of all, but they represented the thousands, right, and others. And so we launched CM3 for the purpose of helping to two things, I guess, two major things. One is to help cities, counties, states, systems, and community organizations build the capacity to form relationships with each other, to launch credible messenger work that could really help to transform and empower young people and families who were justice impacted, right? And so we're working in over 20 places around the country, and all regions, out west, heavily in the South, Northeast, Midwest. So we're in several places and growing in terms of going on the ground, training, development, support, implementation, et cetera, right? All of the work that you imagine and understand, it goes into helping to launch this work and support people at various parts. We have focused in on this really deep, long-term co-navigational walk and support with people over time, right? Other credible messengers are doing more focused front end, violence interruption, geographically based work, hospital-based work. Some are working in schools. So I say all that, we're, in addition to focusing on this long-term care and support, which we're helping to implement in cities and places, we also see ourselves as helping to raise the tide, right? Like, let's lift up not just the particular body of work that we have developed expertise and experience in, this deep, intensive, transformative mentoring, but let's lift up the whole movement, right, of impacted people. So the other part of our work then, in addition to working hands-on in cities, is to develop a network of organizations, of individuals, of credible messengers, of faith leaders, of funders, of researchers, of government system people, all who are leaning into this body of work of empowering impacted people, what we call credible messengers, to do this work. And so tangibly, that takes the form of an actual developing a platform where we can begin to have conferences and bring people together, have more cross-pollination, so that we can know each other, so that we can see each other, that we can call upon each other, so that what's happening in St. Louis may be of help to what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi, and what we're doing in Columbus, Ohio, can impact what we're doing in New Orleans, and sharing. And so that collectively, so to grow this collective, I think, is really the vision, the next step for us, to connect the dots. We're meeting like just amazing people here today and everywhere we go, right? It's this incredibly spiritual, right, transformative process. When we do our trainings and in our work, I always say to my colleagues, I'm like, man, this is church. Like, this is, right? Like, this is powerful, right? This is the testimony, the stories, and the miracles that are happening in terms of lives being touched, right? Everyone on this call can speak to that, right? That's why we're here. So we just want to help to build a network, a collective, so that we can have a collective voice to access more resources, space, and opportunity to do what we do. So it's an ambitious vision, but that's what we're trying to be part of taking our network and merging with other networks to build this greater collective.
It's an ambitious vision, but it's one that I love, and I'm dreaming with you, and having faith that it can come true. I did want to ask we have one question from our chat from Sarah, and I'm pretty sure this is directed towards Clint, but does providing relationships in the DJJ context ever put kids at risk for becoming more emotionally attached to prison life?
I saw that question. Could I just ask, because I want to make sure I understand it. Does it mean by working with them inside of those spaces? I just want to make sure I understood the question. I think I do, but I want to make sure.
Yes, I was just wondering if kids ever get used to like finding their relationships and friendships and love
Got you.
from
Yeah.
not doing right, so.
Excellent question. I hear you. I thought that's kind of where you were coming from in that. Thank you. So in DC, one of the facilities that DYRS, my former place where I was, runs as a detention center, and then a post-trial youth correctional facility called New Beginnings. Well, my predecessors built it to be more home-like, sort of based on the Missouri model. So we just poured more into it, right? Like, good food that we would eat, that we would want our child to eat. Quality education through the Maya Angelou Charter School. Arts and recreation, state-of-the-art things. And so on one hand, it's like, well, you're just building a nicer prison and you're institutionalizing people. But we said, listen, we don't want our young people here. And by the way, we got to the point, it's a 60-bed facility. At one point, we were down to 4 children in there because we were continuing to safely put them back in the community. But the point being is that we said, listen, we're not going to, and not that you're saying this at all, but we're not going to apologize for putting all the love and care we can bring to a young person when they're incarcerated. We're going to do our best to keep them out and get them out. But while they're there, right, we want them to be treated and experience something that we would want for our own children. But what's critical and what was a big push in this work, and this was a struggle at times, that our staff didn't become, and the judges and the prosecutors didn't become intoxicated with how nice it was out there, where they felt that it was better for a child to be out in New Beginnings than in their own community, even though there were struggles. And that was the balancing act, right? And we were saying, listen, we're going to make this place livable, humane, and restorative. But to your question, the ultimate challenge is how do we build that in community? Right? Not inside of these institutions. A child shouldn't have to go to DJJ to get love and care and support, right? But so then that takes intentionality, right? That takes will, and that takes real investment. And even without money, the one thing we have is ourselves. And so we can invest in building the capacity of the village, family by family, right? By engaging them. And the last thing I'll say is that's why we expanded Credible Messenger work in DC to be not just for the young people, but in DC, the mom, the caregiver has credible messengers. We have grandmothers that are credible messengers. We have uncles, we have people, because it's about building the capacity and the love and the support in the community. So that's a great question. And we don't want to institutionalize people. We don't want incarceration to be a step up in quality of life. But at the same time, we don't want it to be a harmful place that damages them and does more harm, than good.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you both Greg and Clinton, because this has been such a helpful, enlightening panel, and I'm very thankful for both of the work you're both doing. Great. Well, I am so excited because it is officially time for us to launch our Juvenile Justice Toolkit titled Reimagining Youth Justice, How Faith Leaders Can Be Involved. This was a toolkit that was created in partnership with Community Connections for Youth. I'm so excited to invite Belinda Ramos, who is with Community Connections for Youth, to join us to walk us through this toolkit. Belinda is honestly, personally, it's just been such a joy to work with. And I'm so thankful for her and all the things that this toolkit is bringing. The goal here really is to provide practical resources for understanding juvenile justice for churches, small groups, families, and individuals. This toolkit will help walk readers through the background, current problems, and potential solutions to the incarceration system in the United States right now. So, Belinda, welcome. Would you please, start us off and talk to us a little bit about this toolkit?
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. I am just so thrilled to be showcasing this toolkit today. So my name is Belinda Ramos. I am the Executive Director at Community Connections for Youth in the South Bronx. And I've been working with Reverend Ruben Austria, who is our founder and key developer of this toolkit for the last 10 years. And I want to he's not able to be here, for this, but I just want to lift him up because this really is a dream come true, I think, for him specifically. I have, when I met Ruben, I grew up in church. So I'm just going to give a little background. I grew up in church and I've had a lot of issues along the way. And I think it was a real comfort to see somebody that I respected align their faith, their view of social justice, and their execution of that work in a way that felt really, really comforting, to me. And in working with him, bringing me into the fold of meeting folks such as those represented on this call was a place of rest, for me and my own faith. And so to see, somebody who had a true vision for the role that a church can play in advocating for young people. I am a sister of a formerly incarcerated individual. My brother was in the system since he was 14 years old, and it broke apart our family. And I am also a product who had to survive her own, or had to break out of her own survivor's guilt, because I was deeply embedded in a community of people who loved me, believed in me when I felt abandoned and unsure, and didn't know how to direct these deeply negative feelings that were ready to hijack me at any moment. And so, of course, those things manifest into decisions that we make as young people. And so when you compare these two things, I felt a tremendous survivor's guilt for what the church, and I don't want to say the church collective, the specific people at my church they were community to me, they were supportive to me, what it would have meant for him if he had had the same thing. And so, Ruben had put this toolkit together, and I assisted him in putting this together as a resource for church. Yes, to learn to advocate and what are the first and primary steps that you can be taking, but also to help bring an understanding about the root issues and problems that and where the help starts to come in on. Oftentimes, what I have seen is there are lots of churches who want to address the issue of those who are incarcerated, and that's often taken the form of visiting folks in prison or doing prison ministry. And that's a positive thing. That's a beautiful thing. I've been involved in those types of things. My start back from college, I've been, visiting young people in detention centers for a few years, running a ministry there, just showing love to young people. But I think that there is so much more, because, when you think about what the full stretch of the arm is, to really understand the systemic problem that we're dealing with, to really understand what true advocacy looks like. So there are other fruits on the tree that are not being picked here. And that the churches don't often know how to build a bridge to accomplish these things. First, there's not a paradigm for it. Second of all, there's just not been real clear resources to engage folks in the whole of the conversation, from what the issue is at hand. Folks are often either they're doing this on their own time, or they have the experience, or this is just something in their wheelhouse. But there's a lot of people left out of the conversation to really understand that this is more than just what young people have done wrong or the decisions that they made, but there are structural issues that really land them in a predicament that only increases self-harm and harm to others. So we wanted to put something together that could bridge the theological underpinning of why doing this work, presents an idea of like what the conditions are that most people kind of have this loose knowing, and the information is really large, and unless you're accessing it yourself, you're going to feel like you may need to be some type of expert. So this toolkit is really set to help people do some deep dives into what the cost of incarceration. That alone, is a very eye-opening thing. The relationship between those costs, how money could be used, using imagination to think about what accessing millions of dollars, billions of dollars that go into this industrial complex that, we are up against, and what that could mean. And so I feel that churches have often sat out of these conversations because, and that's not to say that churches across America, there are many people doing amazing work and loving people, but to have a resource and everyday groups to be able to have conversations around these topics, and then also steps towards doing some real advocacy for young people. Like Clinton said, will you be there for me? How can you be there for them? And so, when you think about the resource that a church is in a community, in New York City, there are as many churches as there are Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. large, small, they're everywhere. And when you think about the invitation to join the fold on a monumental problem that we have in the United States around mass incarceration and how that's impacting young people and the racial issues that are attached to all of these things, I think about us as an amazing army showing up and becoming presence to young people and being a presence to advocate for the things that need to change on their behalf, that we're not just putting the problem on them. I had a conversation. I was traveling recently, and I just want to just touch on to kind of what Clinton and Greg were talking about in the earlier session. Anytime I travel, I'll sit somewhere that's, at a bar and order food. And there's always a conversation like, what do you do? And I love that conversation. I'm here for it because it's always an opportunity for me to educate the everyday person about the conditions that folks are facing. And for the most part, people want to see young people doing good, right? A gentleman I was speaking to, I was, giving him some examples of some of the ways that young people get caught up in the system over very small things that have lifetime ramifications. And he says to me, I just want to see them do right. I just want to see them do good. And I guess under that circumstance, my question is, whose problem is that? Is it the young person's problem to create a new set of decisions so that their life can change, or is this all our problem? And so, so as the late great James Baldwin says, right, like these are all our children, and we will profit or pay for whatever they become. When churches can get and see that this isn't about an us and them, but this is all our problem, it could be a revolutionary thing because there are so many churches and a desire to affect change. There are people that are ready to go. And so today I have the privilege of, unveiling a toolkit that it's not going to cover it all, but what I do think is going to be a great in 43 pages, a crash course on the justice system, a paradigm, a Christian paradigm, specifically on why, on oppression and this work, and a vision for young people that's from a strengths-based view, an understanding of the social conditions that are impacting them, and some examples, stories, and some practical tools to begin conversation. And so we are super excited, to showcase this. It's really a labor of love and a desire really to bring more churches into the fold. I know I am preaching to the choir in the room, but as you get access to this, I know everyone here has a level of influence with others. And to see something like this be utilized to create dialogue is an exciting thing, for us. So Matt, I guess I could go ahead and just broadcast here first. Just give me a second. I'm going to share this on my screen here. Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yes, I can see
Nice,
that. Looks
looking
great.
good. Okay, I can make this a little bit larger here. So the name of the toolkit is Reimagining Youth Justice, How Faith-Based Leaders Can Get Involved. And we call this a toolkit because it's highly interactive, and you can do this alone. But the way we have structured it is to also do this in groups and to engage in what collective learning can bring about and dialogue can bring about. We try to make it as unscary as possible. I think sometimes some of these conversations in church circles can bring about a lot of debate. We try to make these things an undebatable issue about where God's heart is, who he loves, and what he wants to see accomplished, and using stories from specifically the Miriam message, which is something that Ruben has, like his own vision, has come from this idea of the saving work of what Miriam did, for Moses and for a people group, right? And so here we have this toolkit that accomplishes that. So the toolkit is broken up into 3 sections. We have this introduction here, and it's visual and not overwhelming, but the 3 sections are this. Section 1 is on concern, and it's really about what does God care about, and how does he care about suffering and injustice? And so we're using the narrative of Israel in Egypt and oppression and social structures to introduce the conversation around some critical things that we even see now, You'll be able to build that bridge about what these concerns are and what the conditions are of oppression and how justice is used to bring about oppression. Section 2 is around the intervention. So here, how can you know about what's actually going on? And this is, like I was explaining, often folks don't really know the conditions. It stops at what they see in their communities. It stops at what's in front of them, and they don't understand always the larger context and where their place is in all of this. So I think this is one of the more eye-opening parts of this toolkit that allows people to kind of sit with the conditions, the work folks are doing out there, and practical tools for, taking steps around, addressing these issues. And then lastly, we have the section on liberation. What is God's heart for justice? What is his desire for peace for all people? And what are the natural resources that are among you that you can begin to bring forward? So I'm just going to walk through here just to give you examples here. So here you're going to see we're using scripture, we are using storytelling, but also real life applications through the toolkit, so that folks are able to, to think about how this gets carried out in the everyday. So here are some of the things on the dynamics of oppression, racial and ethnic disparities. One thing that I want to show you here, that in the midst of a section, you're able to do, an exercise. What are the relative rates of incarceration in your state for youth of color? Using the Burns Institute United States of Disparities website, find the following information for your state. Again, this is something you can do on your own, but imagine taking this level of activity to understand how this all relates to racial justice, how this all relates, to the bigger picture of solving the issue and creating alternatives to incarceration and the role that churches can play. Here is another example. How much does it cost to incarcerate children in the United States? And so what we've pulled together is, resources from many folks who have done research, who have been, paying attention to, what costs are, what folks are doing out there. And we try to bring all of these resources to you in a tangible way around discussion. How can people of faith take part in the active watching on behalf of young people in the justice system? So we start to begin to give steps just around observation before we're getting to the point of like what you can be doing as a church, as a group, or how you can mobilize members. First, this is around how can you get people to pay attention to what the parts of this that need to be noticed? How can the congregation understand what the current state of the justice system is? What our alternatives to incarceration are about? What is that dream? What about court proceedings, and where they can observe? Because once you're getting closer to these spaces, I mean, obviously people have a lot of aha moments, visiting a facility, seeing, young people being locked up, what it's like seeing the face of a young person in that condition. And that can light things up, for people. But court is another space for folks to understand, like, wow, that light starts going off. That's just saying this is more than just displacing the problem. And we're not saying that young people don't need guidance, that they haven't, that there aren't, there's youthful misbehavior that's at play here. But again, that is only part of the picture. How are things playing out for young people that is not doing justice to them, that is not lifting them up, that is not looking at them through the lens of love and care and what they deserve? So we give you some step-by-steps here, supporting members of your own congregation. I think this is one of the things that the toolkit hits home on. When I shared this idea about us and who's this problem, I think the first thing that we want to say, and that is critical, is that before we decide that this is an issue that's happening outside of a congregation, it's first realizing that within your own congregation, there are families and young people who are facing court involvement, who are facing issues with systems. And it's often very and highly stigmatized. It's stigmatized amongst family members. I know that was a situation, for me and for us in our family. My brother's issues with the justice system isolated him, from the rest of the family. And, we have, stories of this whole idea of black sheep and things like that. And so your first line of opportunity are the young people that are in your congregation. or the parents and families that are in your congregation that could use your support. And one thing that this toolkit can and will accomplish is giving you steps for concrete support. Like what are specific things that are low hanging fruit that can be accomplished through your advocacy, through your presence, through your love, through your care, that doesn't take you into needing to become an expert, a civil rights lawyer, or any, activist, but just simply neighbor loving neighbor and having an investment in speaking up on behalf of somebody who cannot speak up for themselves in these settings. So we get into some of that about supporting members of the church. And I just want to highlight this. I'm not going to go through every section, but through the toolkit, you'll see essential questions for, wrestling with some of these things that are shown. We also give some of the natural reactions that folks have, around these issues, like what comes up for folks under court observation. How do you even begin to get into courts? Visiting detention centers. We talked about that, and I see that a lot of churches have some experience with prison ministry, and that's great. And we want to continue to say, like, listen, young people need visits. There are young people that can go without a single visit. These are essential when building relationships. And, for us and our organization, this is about building a connection into the community. That does not have to happen when a young person comes home. That can be happening from where they are. And there are advocacies and steps that you can take and relationship building that you can have with systems who will allow you in, who will allow you to show love, to show concern to young people and build bridges so that they're able to be connected outside. And it is more than just connecting them to you as a church, but creating a web of caring adults, because those are the main factors for young people. The number one things they're going to need and contribute to their own self-actualizing is relationship with caring adults and the opportunity for engaging in positive activities. And so that is not anything that is far out of the reach for any church or community of faith. We have group discussion questions at the end of each section. Again, if you're doing this in a group setting, this can be accomplished. So we go into the intervention section, and we talk about the strengths-based view of how to view the justice system, and how the justice system really pits young people from a deficit base, and how we can come in from a strengths-based lens. Nobody wants to there is no hope in attaching or in labeling someone as a problem. That is not, that's not the entry point. And if we see this as a problem that we all have about the social conditions, we much less see youth, as the ones to label and to fix them and to try to do all of these things, but to truly extract the strengths that are really under the rubble of all of these conditions and all of these, social conditions, all of these life circumstances, traumas that sit underneath there that we want to extract. So we want to give a strengths-based view of how to approach these, and using, again, the story of Moses and Miriam, his sister, and the work that she did and what she did to save her brother. I want to move over. So here, we give you an example here of letters of support from clergy. Letters of support can go a really, really long way. Youth and families or youth can go into court proceedings with no one on their side, right? Aside from, a public defender or, somebody there, that's part of the system, but no one showing up from the community. When I think I just keep going back to those words that Clinton, reminded us of, will you be there? That powerful idea of somebody being by your side through one of the scariest and darkest moments of your life is one of the most magnificent things that you can do for a young person. And so that can mean the difference between a life of deeper system involvement or a life of thriving community for that young person, opportunities, to be in the center of the best parts of their community. And so what we want to do here is offer you an example and how to approach writing a letter to the court on behalf of a young person. Again, this is low-hanging fruit and achievable. And here we show you an example of the do's and don'ts of writing a letter writing a letter if you have a program in your church, and how to do that. And then what are the best practices in doing that? Because obviously you don't want to paint a picture that's not true. You don't want to make promises that you can't meet, and you don't want to put yourself in a predicament that is just outside of what's really within your wheelhouse. So we give practical guidance to, church members and communities of faith, how to testify in court. That's not always a comfortable space, and not everybody is ready to do that. But, and you don't have to worry about something like going like, you're going to be cross-examined. This is an opportunity for somebody in the community to speak on youth's behalf in a way that no report is going to be able to speak about them, right? When you read a case, it's always going to be around what went wrong, what they did wrong, and all the reasons, why the court needs to be paying attention to this behavior. Who is going to speak on behalf of youth as an asset? Who is going to be there to speak as youth who has people by their side? These are the things that courts and judges often want to see, right? Who is going to be there? Because they're not going to be on the hook, for making sure that if you're advocating for them to be in the community, that then they will be unresourced to live successfully in the community and be appropriately supported around them. So we give tips on doing that. What is life after court? So life after court here is around connecting them to all the resources that are out there. Obviously, churches can do a lot. You can put together groups, and you can, put together activities, or you can join what's out there in your community that you may not know about that is actively engaging young people. And so what we wanted to do was give a breakdown of some of the opportunities as a whole and as a practice of what to look for. So things like positive youth programs with positive youth development models that are competent and able to, build in youth leadership, build in youth voice, build in a sense of belonging, all integral, to the development and the self-actualizing of young people. A breakdown of what credible messenger work is for those with lived experience who have, this is again showing one of the most positive and highly effectual impacts in the lives of young people, folks with lived experience who understand what young people are going through, who can communicate with them, who have the credibility and the authenticity to be able to draw close and address and be there and show love for young people in a supportive way. Family support programs. For us, at our organization, an evaluation of one of our programs, the success of the young people, the best success was highly tethered to the support that parents got. Our program really has parent coaches, parents who have faced the system along with their child and have navigated the chaotic, often lies and misleadings that often happen. So we have parents who have the experience to guide them. So these are some of the opportunities that are out there that don't need to be disconnected from the church, but in all unity, we can all be playing a part in supporting this monumental task, right? Education opportunities, employment training, and case management. Here you'll have, again, some series of activities and exercises for you to think about how you can go about finding out who is this point of contact. Obviously, this is a small sheet of paper. You can write this here, but you can also just use this as a paradigm and something to develop out. We do get into the idea, I think this was touched on earlier, I think Greg had mentioned this, just the idea of proselytizing and using these things. I think that's a coaching that often sometimes churches need to have. I think when folks have had very transformative experiences under faith, you want to share those and may use this, or folks may use this as an opportunity to share this faith, but that's not what we're here to do. That could be an outcome. I'm not going to say that might not be an outcome if a young person is interested or if a young person is asking, but we are doing this work truly for love's sake and love's sake alone, right? And to say, we're going to meet young people where they are, guide them in the path that they feel like they are in, because that is the ultimate sense of autonomy that we want to build into them. If we're dealing with a system that disempowers youth, powers youth, how can we allow young people to take their own power steps in their life and discover who it is who they are? That's the positive relationship that bridges and allows young people to ask about you. But our goal here is to help folks from communities of faith understand how to navigate that. Because obviously, at least for me in church, it's always been about, oh, you need to share this, you need to share, you need to share about your life with God or your salvation or things like that. And so being able to, to separate that apart for folks to understand why it's important to not do that is a critical piece of what we're broadcasting here. So last is the liberation aspect. And again, we're, looking at this story in the Bible about the liberation of an oppressed people and some parables to get us through this. But we're tying up this end to say, this is the vision that we have for true liberation. We had this little debate about like whether it's freedom or liberation, but it's, it's really like setting young people who are captive, free, right? Captive because of the way our system is set up, the way, racial injustice and the oppression has worked out in this country that has ensnared young people is really waiting for them to be born, in order to feed it. And so when folks become aware at certain levels as to the background picture of all of this, we really do believe that they can be ignited to see this from a different point of view and really almost change their whole paradigm, even in how they're addressing young people, which is often from, you got yourself in trouble and we're trying to get you to stop being in trouble, right? We have to do that for all young people, regardless of race, ethnicity, country. Young people are going to do the things, young people are going to young people, right? And so our guidance really is to see them for the beautiful, precious, purposeful beings that they are and see their lives transform as a result of watering them in this way. We do connect folks to the advocacy that is happening there. Again, for us, this toolkit is not just around how you can support youth. Those are really practical steps. But when you think about the monumental problem, what can you be doing as the light starts turning on for folks when you're in court and you start getting deeper into how these things play out, you're going to want to address the issue. It's going to be difficult to just all of a sudden pretend that you didn't see what you just saw. And so we want to channel folks and direct folks to a lot of work that folks are, doing out there and how you can connect to, to advocacy movements, to civil rights movements and human rights organizations that are set to address these issues in the larger context. It builds in here success stories of states that have, been successful at shutting down prisons, what the alternatives are. Folks don't always know, right? When you say, let's defund this or let's shut this down, that there's nothing on the other end in answer to, right? Where no one's talking about a lack of accountability, but we're talking about beautiful, loving accountability that can happen at the hands of people who love, as opposed to a crime and punishment system that seeks to destroy your life. So we are, we're presenting facts, presenting numbers. But by the end of this, we hope that you're able to engage in meaningful discussion, but also take practical steps for how you can mobilize the people within your wheelhouse or even other churches for moving things forward and really changing the game. People of faith are needed in the fold. Like I said, when I think about the amount of churches that are out there, on any given block and in any given community, the influence the church has in this country, with the right information in their hands and the right kind of conversations and a solid paradigm of faith to be able to push and land people in a way where they can confidently move and understand why they're doing this. I really do believe that could result into what you were talking about, Maddie, right? Like that ultimate goal that we all have, to seeing the end of youth punishment and incarceration, and seeing the liberation of young people and really raising them up and investing in them in a way that we have invested into the most ineffective system that we have going on right now, called the justice system, that is sitting on lots and lots of money that can be used to really water the ground for young people. And so I'm going to come off screen here, but we are, excited to share with you. Maddie, I'll turn it over to you about how you can access this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Belinda. And yeah, absolutely would just love to give Ruben another shout out for the amazing work he did on this. I, you know, this toolkit really just emphasizes so many things that have already been talked about this morning, just in the importance of showing up, being consistent, using the resources that you have. And I would like to echo what Belinda just said about churches have so much influence in this country, and the ability to use that influence is a gift when it comes to helping out juveniles and supporting children. And so, yes, everyone who has registered for this convening will get a follow-up email, which will have the toolkit linked to it in a PDF form. It will also it's not currently available on the Center for Public Justice website, but it will be available on there shortly. And we hope that you share it with everyone that you can, anyone that you think it could be a good resource for, even if they themselves are not a faith-based leaders, but they might have someone who they could think of that really needed it. It's a great touch point for someone who doesn't know much about what's going on. Belinda, I love that you talked about how fun it is when people ask you your job, because I kind of have a similar thing where sometimes we'll be like, what do you mean juvenile justice? Like, what's happening with juveniles in America? And I'm like, oh, let's talk about it. And so I think it's a great place to start. It's, you can be in small groups just in your church, but think about how truly powerful it would be if a Bible study or a small group walk through this together, and even just did one or two of the suggestions that are listed in there as possible places that they can be strong advocates for children in their community. So yeah, we hope that you will share it with your connections, your networks. We hope that you will yourself will read through it, see some of the resources there, and yeah, we really do just hope it's a gift to your organizations and to your churches. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions for Belinda or for the Center for Public Justice, please just put them in the chat and we will try to get you that information as soon as we can. But yeah, thank you, Belinda.
Thank you.
Um, Okay, so we will now be shifting to our final panel for the day, called Positive Relationships, Why Relationships Are So Essential for Justice. I'm really excited about this panel, especially after we've had such good conversations about what it means to show up. I'm sad, I feel like Clinton should just like rejoin us almost. But we have with us some amazing speakers, and I would just like to remind you that in the chat, there's a link to all of our speakers' bios. I'm just giving them a short introduction, but they are truly esteemed guests who are doing amazing work. And I don't want to minimize any of their amazing accomplishments, but I'm just going to give the short bio so that we can have as much time to hear all of the things that they have to share with us today. But first, I would like to introduce Latoya Wright, who is with the Foundation of Hope Youth Diversion Coordinator. Latoya is the president of the school board within the community that she lives in. And prior to joining the Foundation of Hope, Latoya worked with the homeless population youth that were in the Children Youth Services and was a program coordinator for a pregnant and parenting teen program. Also on our panel is Di Mohammed McKnight of Bridgeport, Connecticut native, who has worked in the field of reentry for over 14 years and has been instrumental in leading change in the state of Connecticut, and reentry services and advocacy for building a first opportunity society that enhances public safety. Next, I would like to welcome Lisette Neves, who is the Community Connections for Youth Chief Program Officer. She started with CCFY as a project manager for the Community Connections Detention Diversion Program. Through CCDD, Lizette worked with Horizon Juvenile Detention Center staff as well as CCFY parent peer coach and peer mentor to facilitate creative strategies that divert youth from to resources in their community. And then finally, I would like to welcome Mary Hall, who is the program coordinator at Connecticut Violence Intervention Program in New Haven, Connecticut. She is passionate about social justice, community, and helping young people. Welcome to the panel. I'm so thankful to have all of you here and joining us today. And I think one thing that's really fantastic about this panel is you are all coming from different organizations who have different touch points in a juvenile's life, in a youth's life. And so If we could just go around and we'll start with Latoya. If you could tell us a little bit about the organization that you represent and how you got there.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Latoya. I work for Foundation of Hope. I am the youth diversion coordinator. My job is to divert any youth from going into the juvenile justice system. I've only been there a couple months. I got there because I've always been passionate about working with young people. I was a teenage mom, and becoming a teenage mom has a negative, stigma you placed on you. So I had people within the community who just believed in me. Who said, "Okay, you won't be the first, you won't be the last. This is not your end of your story. You can still be successful and become something." So from that and those people, it just made me just want to truly just work with young people and be that person to somebody else. So that's truly how I even began working with young people. And then, like it was already read, that I've just had my share over the years. I was really passionate about working with teens, pregnant and parenting teens. However, when I decided to run for school board, I couldn't no longer work in the school district. So I felt like my voice would be stronger on the board. So I decided to leave that and go into something else, which led me to working with homeless youth and then youth who were involved with with CYF. So once I did that, it led me this opportunity to become the youth diversion coordinator opens up, and I decided that let me explore that, let me see what it's like coming from the community that I live in, and just the violence that centered it. And there wasn't nothing that was really there for youth. It was like, this is their punishment, that's it, nothing else. Let's not hear from them. It's just it. Let's quiet them up. Let's send them away. Let's put them in a corner. And then being on school board, seeing our suspension rate, and that suspension rate between people, Black and brown people, and then people, white, that was very alarming. But what else is out there? What else? What are we giving them? What else are we doing? So just really led me to really want to get involved. So I am doing a lot of intervention and prevention. So my job is to keep youth out of the juvenile justice system. But I felt like, what can we do to prevent them? Let's intervene before they even get there. What can we come up? So I reestablished a program within Foundation of Hope, going inside schools, doing a lot of intervention for truancy, suspension rates, fighting, working with magistrates that before they even got to that point where they will be charged, send them to our program. And if they participate, then they won't have any charges against them. So it's a 90-day program that it's all volunteer based. They're not adjudicated to do it or anything like that. So it's 90 days, and that, if they complete it, then great, they won't be having any charges. But at the end of the 90 days, if we assess them and we see that they need to be retained because they're just not there, there's just more work that we need to do, there's just more resources that we need to wrap around them, then we retain them for however time that we need to do that. Within that time, we do one-on-one case management. I'm very big on family involvement because so many times we put the responsibility on everyone else, but not the family. So I'm very big on having the families be just as responsible as us, but having that family engagement. And a lot of times you find out that the families have involved in the court system. So let's give them some resources. Let's wrap resources around them as well, so we can bring everyone together and give them all the resources that we can. We just may be able to, achieve our goal of, just making them not going back into the juvenile justice system, or, either going there or staying out of there. So that's basically what I do. So I do a lot of going inside the schools, doing one-on-one weekly workshops, just family engagement. I'm very big on just family engagement with them, and just wrapping as many resources around them as we can. And then, building that rapport and having that non-judgmental zone for them, that, that they don't feel judged and their to do from their activity that they were involved in. So I do a lot of that with them, like a lot of like center groups activities with them. That's just the gist of what I do.
Yeah, just a little bit, just not doing much work at all. Just, wow, that's wonderful. Also, thank you for serving on school board. I'm very thankful for everyone who is willing to do be a part of our society in that way, which I know can be really tough. So just want to thank you for that.
I call it a
But
free headache.
It is truly community service. So thank you. Okay, next we're gonna go to Day.
Thank you. Let me begin just by saying in the name of God, the beneficent, the merciful, I greet all you in the greeting words of peace be unto you. My name is Daid Muhammad McKnight, and for the past 14, 15 years, I've been working for an agency called Family Reentry, CRJ, and I've been going into youth prison, and we facilitate reentry, link the young men up with mentors, and then provide the post-release mentoring for successful reentry. But prior to that, something that's important that allows me to connect with young people is that number one, I'm from the community that I serve in, and number two, I want to thank every one of y'all here because I am that young person that you are trying to help right now. I was formerly incarcerated. I served about 17 and a half years on a 25-year sentence. I've been out for 18 years. And once I got out, 2 years after I was out was when I really got my opportunity outside of volunteering, was through a community organization called Raphael Taylor Community Center. They gave me a job as a youth violence prevention coordinator. The job, the title was new. They didn't have any structure to the position. I said, well, what do I do? They said, we just want you to get young people that are not fitting in with the regular activities in the center, that are getting kicked out every day, to get them involved in a group and get them to the point where they could participate in the regular activities. So I didn't use anything I learned in college to accomplish that, which I went to college inside prison. But what I did use was street psychology. I sat outside, I watched all the kids who got kicked out. I watched the kids who were with each other. I noticed who was the leader. And I said, if I get up under the leader, I could get the rest of them. So I went, talked with the leader, said, hey, man, what do you think about let's start our own group over here? And said, why don't you have your guys come in? I'll get some pizza. We chop it up. They came in, we did that. And then from there, they really got involved and helped co-create that group that when the summertime came, the director let us have our own budget. We had our own summer camp. It got to the point where they didn't want to go to the regular activities. I'm just joking, but they really loved what we were doing. And eventually they were able to transition into the regular activities. But that was my first experience legitimately outside of volunteering. Since that time, after 2 years in 2007, from 2007 to 2009, I then was recruited by a man named Kenny Jackson, who was kind of doing what Clint Lacey was doing way before it was called Credible Messenger. Kenny Jackson was doing something which a lot of people didn't like the word. He had developed something called the Ex-Offender Alumni Association, and he was recycling people who had been incarcerated to become certified mentors and put us in the schools to work with troubled youth. And I got involved with him volunteering, and then eventually he recruited me to be a part of an innovative reentry program called Fresh Start in 2009. And that's when I began going in prisons, the adult prison. And I also became a volunteer Islamic chaplain for the past 15 years in a volunteer capacity. But while doing that, I was recruited by someone on our job who ran the youth program. They had to get a shoulder operation. This is by the grace of God, it all fell into place. And he said, hey, you're already cleared. Could you cover for me? So I covered for him. When he came back, I went with him. And he said, I'm just going to tell the director, I don't ever want to do this program without you again. And I've been there with him ever since he retired. And now I'm the program manager of that transitions mentoring program at Manson Youth Institution in Cheshire, Connecticut. So that's been my journey. Another thing that we've done is we also see high value in this program by another organization that we collaborate with called RISAP, called Street Safe. And what they do is they participate in youth gun violence intervention. They try to stop the gun violence before it occurs. And I volunteered to help them, Ebony Epps, for the past 10 years. And we've had a great relationship. And even my mosque has got involved and collaborated where in the summertime, we try to get as many Black and Latino men to walk through the community and bring people who are from service providers, because the problem we have in our community, I can't speak for everywhere, but I know in the Black and Latino and poor white community in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is 35 minutes from the Bronx, the resources are limited, but then the resources that are there, people could live right next door to the resource and not know it's in the building. It's insane. So we said, listen, the people not going to come to the resources. Let's bring the resources to the people. So when we walk through where we collaborated, even churches and some pastors have got involved with us. And we said, we just want to get 100 Black and Latino men, bring the service providers and pass out your information. And so we don't care if we recruit one person to come to our mosque. We could care less as long as the quality of life of one individual is enhanced by coming into contact with all of us making this walk. If you recruit them in the church, God bless them. If they come to the mosque, God bless them. If they go to the reentry program, God bless them. If they go to NAAA, God bless them. If they go to get resources from over here, that's going to help them with rental assistance or with groceries or food inequities, whatever it is, we just want the people to have a better condition of life. So it's not about one individual group trying to use this as a means to recruit people, but it's really about a grassroots approach. And I feel like that's really what we need going forward with helping young people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. What a powerful testimony and a real gift for us who are all listening. Also, thanks for pointing out Street Safe. We love them. They were speakers on our convening last year, and they really are doing some phenomenal work. And it's always encouraging to hear other organizations working together. It's all about that collaboration. So next, let's go to Lisette, which if I'm saying your name wrong, please correct me.
I was about to. My name is Lisette and my last name is Nieves. I am with CCFY. CCFY is founded by Reverend Ruben Austria. You guys got to meet Belle from our team. We're a Bronx-based organization, and our mission is to equip grassroots faith and neighborhood organizations to develop community-driven alternative to incarceration programs for youth. We also directly serve youth and families. Kindred with Latoya is that we really focus on the whole family, not just the young person, because there's a lot of shame and isolation that comes with having a young person involved in the justice system. It's not something that you really want to talk about with folks, and we create that safe space where they can, download and vent and really just also help them navigate the juvenile justice system. We also provide training and technical assistance throughout the country, to help people develop youth-driven community and system partnerships. And most importantly, our hashtag is No Kids in Cages, because we really believe in a society where young people are not sent to, cages. That's not what they need. And I was introduced to CCFY actually a year after it was created. I was, and they didn't know this, but this panel is really connected. I too was worked at a community center. I was the director of the community center, and Ruben walked through the doors, and he was meeting with one of the residents and introduced me. And it just turned out that we were doing a pilot project working with a diversion program for really low-level offenders, young people who were, arrested for shoplifting. And the idea was that they would come, and before they had them do like a packet. Like if you were shoplifting, we all know that's not effective. That's not a diversion. That's busy work. So we actually, we were introduced to this pilot project, and I have been doing youth work for a long time, but never with a focus on juvenile justice and those young people in the community centers. So the idea was that they would come to our community center, be exposed to an environment where there were a lot of different activities, with the hopes that they would connect, to the activities in the organization. And Ruben walks in, and it just turns out that they were doing an Alternative to Incarceration Institute. And I was invited to, participate. And I have to say that it was life altering in the sense of that, you know, I have been working with young people for so long, but never really paid attention to the impact that the juvenile justice system has on our young people. And I knew that they were young people impacted by the system that were coming to our center. And this provided us an opportunity to create programming. So I started as an ATI Institute participant, but then we became partners of the South Bronx Community Connections Program, which CCFY made an exception because our organization was not a grassroots organization, but I was a grassroots leader. And I lived 10 blocks from my community center. So like I was rooted in the community, and we became a partner. And you know, one of the young people that came through our doors is now a staff person, you know, 15 years later or so. And fast forward 2017, I was in between work. Ruben and his Pied Piper self called me and said, I have a position. Are you interested? And I said, you know, I'll take it, but it's going to be temporary because, you know, I'm not really looking to work anywhere. My first day was on February 14th, 2007. And here I am 6+ years later, soon to be 7. And I say, you know, I fell in love with the organization. I really did. Yeah. And I started working, and you had talked about it, at the Horizon Community Center. I mean, sorry, that's a big mistake. Horizon Detention Center. And it's very much a detention center, nothing like Clint described in DC. But, you know, I had the opportunity to meet young people when they just got arrested, right? And it was like an aha moment that I had, because like all my life I was impacted by incarceration and didn't even realize it. My brother has been incarcerated for 41 years since the age of 16. So I met those young people and I thought to myself, man, if my brother has something like this back in the 80s, if my family has something like this back in the 80s, maybe we would not have suffered as much as we have. So it never dawned on me. Like now my personal and my professional life are like this. And I'm really grateful to be able to work through that trauma at my place of employment, you know, and really kind of like sought that support outside of work, even to really kind of like tap into the pain that happens to the family, you know, when someone is incarcerated. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I wonder how many people could give great testimonies about having Ruben walk into a room and having their just whole life changed in a lot of ways. Such a good testament to the work of Community Connections for Youth too. Okay, Mary, you are our final panelist, but we're excited to hear what you have to share.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been working at CTVIP, which is Connecticut Violence Intervention Program, for about actually a little over 2 years now. CTVIP has been the work is founded in violence prevention, but 2 years ago we expanded to be to violence prevent. I'm sorry, we're rooted in violence prevention, but we've really put a turn in the next 2 years into programs like diversion programs like JRB. And that's kind of where I came in 2 years ago. I brought the Juvenile Review Board with me, and I supervised both the violence prevention program in Hamden, Connecticut, and also the diversion program, which is now called the Hamden Youth Diversion Project. And, you know, it's great work. It's great to work with both the most at risk. And when I say most at risk, I mean youth that have been identified as being perpetrators, you know, at a high risk of being perpetrators of violence or victims of violence. So we work with youth who are, you know, identified at that level of risk. And we also work with youth who are just, so to speak, stepping off the porch or at you know, on the spectrum of risk farther down, because we understand that it's all connected. And if there isn't an intervention somewhere along the line, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to reach a higher risk and possibly end up incarcerated. So we really want to interrupt that. And in regards as to why I do this work, or what led me to the organization that I work for, you know, I always say, I feel like this work chooses you, you don't choose it. I was a kid that behaved poorly. Like, you know, I had lots of opportunities and kind of felt like I fitted more with the bad kids, um, and never seemed to be able to make a good decision, didn't do well in school. And I was blessed to have the opportunity to turn all that around, by the grace of God. So I feel like I owe it to give that back, like to be able to help other people. When I work with youth, I do not tell my story. Like, I don't like go into my story, but they can sense my story without me even telling it, just by my ability to meet them where they're at, you know, not judge them, just listen, and they want to engage. So I think that's really important. That's why I do the work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Um, yeah, and you know, like we said, this has been a continuing theme we've talked about so much. We know that these relationships are really important, but we also know that there are a lot of barriers and challenges in truly having and restoring relationships with just involved youth. And I think that you know, in many states, the justice system is actually removing children from their communities and removing them from the relationships that they've previously had and some of the most important relationships in their life, especially with their parents, with their families. Um, and you know, for those of you who mentioned on this panel, right, that you focus specifically on like having that family involvement and being with the parents, how can diversion programs really like stop the loss of those relationships, like be involved in making sure that children and juveniles are able to like maintain those relationships and also like still have accountability in those relationships without, you know, just like removing them from them. That makes sense.
All right, I'll start. um, so when the question was framed in terms of like, you know, what's happening now in New York City, right, is, you know, policy changes. We have learned, unfortunately, despite fights and battles. Oh, great. Of course, my dog decides to chime in right now. Right now, as soon as I start talking, he wanted to say, is that, you know, what we've learned, unfortunately, is depending upon who's in leadership, is that those policies that we fought hard for can get rolled back at a drop of a dime, right? So that, you know, while we need to continue to push for those policy changes, relationships that we form are everlasting, right? Those ever last whatever policy comes and goes. So that, you know, that focus on building relationships with our families, with our young people, have a lasting impact. You know, our organization can help to process and develop those relationships if they're all on the outside, right? So that, you know, one of the things that we are doing and want to do more of is, you know, restorative justice circle work, right? Where there is a dynamic within the family, they're having difficulties, and it's, you know, bringing them to circle. Let the circle, you know, figure this out. And, you know, and it's a process, right? So that we meet with the young people, we meet with the families, we kind of break down what's happening, and then we bring them together, to really try to tease out what are the issues. And in addition, wrap those families around with support. If you stick them in a cage, right, like, you can help that family, but they're still dealing with, you know, the loss of that child and not being in the home. And, you know, that leads to other issues. I mean, we have a parent who has turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism because of her child, right? Like, that's not how, when we met her, she didn't have that issue, but this is something that developed, and that has an effect on the entire family. So that, you know, we're about to kind of dive in and do a circle with this family so that her kids can tell her, you know, like, this is having an impact on us. And those are difficult conversations that only can happen if you build that community, if you build that trust, so that like it's okay for them to let you in. And I think that's why it's important for the young people to remain in the community and have an opportunity to connect to a program and that focuses on their strengths, because all the time they're telling them what you're doing wrong, what you're doing this, but no, we really try to find out where the passion lies. What are you interested in? Let's try to develop that, and use that as a resource. In addition to building collaborations, because we can't be the be all end all of the organization. We want to make sure that we are connecting with communities and organizations that are in their backyard, so that like when they walk out the door, they'll be like, "Mira, Johnny, where you been?" Right? Because I could see Johnny on my way to the bodega, or I could see Johnny on my way to Third Avenue, and I'm talking about my Bronx perspective. But when you have programs that are rooted in the community, that increases the accountability, right? It goes back to my generation, where the community was involved in raising that young person, right? Like, you didn't only have to answer to your mom or your dad, you had to answer to your auntie, the neighbor across the street, the bodega owner, who was like, "Mira, ¿qué tú haces aquí?" Like, what are you doing here? So that like when they're in the community and you support the community and give them the resources, right? Because it's not just about like throwing them back in their community, but building the capacity of the community to deal with the issue and deal with the problem. So that's, to me, why those relationships are paramount.
Also, can I add to that really quick?
Go for it. Absolutely.
Also, like, those of us that do the work with these kids, like, we understand that trauma is at the root of a lot of these behaviors. By throwing them in jail or removing them from the community, or removing them from their support system, that only further traumatizes them. That doesn't make their behaviors better. That increases the trauma. By keeping them in the community and by keeping them around resources that can help them and address that trauma, and with community organizations that understand that trauma, urban trauma, then you're much more likely to have a good impact on that kid.
I just want to also add that within our program, we have foundation, I should say, we have an aftercare program, which is for any adult who's been incarcerated, whether it been for 2 days, 2 minutes, 2 hours, that they qualify for. So a lot of times you find out that the child's family has been incarcerated. So they also are able to participate and get resources through the aftercare program. So that has really been tremendous for us too. But like I was saying earlier, I've been very big on family engagement, because you just cannot make this all about the kid without putting some responsibility back on the family and giving them the resources that they need as well. So that's many times we're doing family painting night, or it can just be employment. Maybe mom and dad didn't graduate, so they don't even know how to fill out a job application. So if the whole family is getting that resource and being educated on how to do a resume and how to fill out a job application, it's more beneficial for the family, and it makes the unit feel good together, like they're working on something together. So family engagement is just very big. But I've also been fortunate to have magistrates not want to remove children from the household, that want to keep them within the households. So what work can we do? And also that we since I've been with the organization, is doing things like national night out to make the family be involved, trunk or treats. We're getting ready to do breakfast with Santa that will pay for them to come, and just do those engagement activities with the family to keep that foundation. Because, as we all know, a strong foundation is everything. So helping them build that strong foundation, or, keep that strong foundation, and that support, kids feeling supported by their mother and father, and working through whatever issues, that the family has gone through. And as you said, Mary, urban trauma is real. And, so many times people say we got to have those the heart to heart. Sometimes we got to have those heart to heart conversations. And having those heart to heart conversations breaks down so many things, the deep rooted things that people just don't want to talk about. But once you have those heart to heart, you can accomplish so many things within the family and accomplish so much. And I think we see greater goals when we have those heart to hearts.
I wanna
If I may
add something.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead, sis.
No, you go for
No,
it. We're like, no, but you said something that was so critical, Latoya, is that like we bring families together, right? I remember one time there was a system partner who was like, do you do workshops on like teaching them parenting skills? And I'm like, no, that's not what we do. We bring community together, right? Under celebration, under a paint night. And that happens organically with them providing support to each other. You don't always have to be the person in front of the room facilitating the conversation. You build community. That's what brings them back to the next workshop. It's not, I mean, yeah, I would like to say it's us and our hospitality and the food and the childcare, yes. But the key is the community and the camaraderie that is built in those workshops. You don't always have to work or handle or address the issue based on deficits. Let's focus on the strengths. Let's create opportunities for communities to come together. And yeah, you hit it on the nose, Latoya, and we do the same thing.
excellent point. I just wanted to add something from like a, I don't know, it may sound totally upside down to you, but I'm just giving you my viewpoint. And I think that it's really sad that this is a reflection of social commentary, but in my community, in our community, women are suffering, man. If a woman has a son, she's suffering to the point that when this young man gets locked up, she's saying, I could sleep better at night that he's in the penitentiary. Mm-hmm. This is serious. This is serious. And we have to build a relationship with the families and with the department, with the families, because we want her to know this is not normal, that you feel better that he's in prison. Because we're in an environment where we have a lack of resources, a deficient educational system, and because of the trauma that was addressed prior to now, that's one of the key characteristics of post-traumatic stress disorder is inability to focus. How can he focus? So some people go to Yale, some people not fortunate, we go to jail. But it's still being removed from the environment in a place, if you use it wisely and use your time wisely, you could come out with something that you probably couldn't get when you were there in that environment that had you distracted because you had a heightened sense of awareness, worried about your safety. This is real. But even though this is real and it exists, we have to create the narrative to get families to understand this is not normal. This is an injury that has happened to us and it is painful, but we have been in pain so long, we don't even see it as an injury anymore. We see it as a blessing that this young man got removed from the community. So she don't have to go. This what's happening in my community, man, it's a travesty. It's a travesty. We got young men getting murdered and their mother don't have money. She got to put a can in the bodega or do a what you call those things online to get money to help bury her son. And the young man is in a youth organization. They 30 wolves deep. They all come to the funeral, don't give the mother $10 and wear t-shirts that say rest in peace. I'm having conversations with young brothers in groups saying, hey man, you in the group, let's try to turn it from negative to positive. But in the meantime, you say you love that brother carrying the flag, but you ain't give his mother $10 for the funeral. It's 50 of y'all. Y'all can't come up with $50 a piece. This, and I don't mean to go into this. This stuff is insane, man. Young men being killed over Facebook comments. Why? I'm building a narrative to explain the insanity of a mother saying, I can sleep better at night. My son is in prison.
I just want to add too, I think a lot of it has to do with on all sides having expectations without communication. Because I think that's what it is. And I even can take that into my own life. So many times we have expectations of something, someone, without having communication of what it is. So a youth can have expectation of their mother, father, teacher, who peer, and not communicate what their needs are or what it is they need. So I really focus on and try to be focused on, what's your expectations of us? How can we help? What it is you need, so that you can communicate to us, so that we can properly give you your needs. We can connect you to the right resources, connect you to the right therapist, connect you to the right, mental, like whatever it is, whatever, communicate that, because I don't want you to have an expectation of me and me not meet that, and then you feel like I failed you, but there was no communication of what your needs is. So I really am big on let's not have any expectations. Let's do more communication. So yeah.
And one more thing. Unfortunately, it takes time. Like that's part of the difficult thing. And I think the system is like, finally starting to catch up a little bit to understand that this isn't like a quick endeavor here. You know what I mean? Like just building the trust alone sometimes takes 6 months, like or 3 months or whatever. So these things take time. And the first step is building that trust, and then you can get the person to tell you what they need. It's not always immediate. But yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, that's a great addition, Mary. I think too, this is just like another way that we point out the justice system itself is just built against juveniles. Like it's built against having any chance of rehabilitation here. And so I think that like noticing that and seeing how those things are just so inconsistent with the the things that we need, which is time. And I appreciate too like the need for hard, uncomfortable, honest conversations is so apparent here. And talk about something that's underfunded is hard, honest conversations. It's much easier just have like the fluff and talk about that than the reality um, of what it means to. I'm going to steal Belinda's phrase, the a loving accountability. Because yeah, we're not saying that children don't need accountability. They need that community where every single person is looking out for them and imagining a better future for them and holding them accountable to that better future. Um, so I'm curious from, each of the organizations you work within and like where you're situated, if you could, have something that you would want to see faith leaders or faith-based organizations doing to encourage positive relationships better, especially in situations where relationships have been broken from mistrust or, different situations. What would there be any advice or something that you wish you were seeing faith leaders do more or churches doing more to help encourage these relationships?
I would say I wish we as humans would get back to humanizing each other. We are all human and we all fall short daily. There is no perfect person. I can say within my church, I've been there for since I was 5. I'm 40, so you do the math. And I can see there has been a lack of youth. There's not a lot of youth no more in the church, and I think it's because we're not humanizing our youth. They're young people. They're gonna make mistakes, and you're not making them feel comfortable with coming to church without feeling judged or looked down, or because their auntie and uncle are not sitting in the pulpit or on that pew every Sunday, then they're out. No, that's not okay. So I just wish the church leaders would get back to opening the doors of the church and meeting youth where they are today. It is not 1982, it's not 1992, and it's not 2002. It is 2023. This is a whole different generation that we're dealing with. These kids are exposed to way more than what we've been exposed to at our age. And I feel like I'm not that old, and I wasn't even exposed to, and even being a teenage mom, I still wasn't exposed to as much as these kids are exposed to today. But I just really wish that, church leaders would get back to making the church feel welcoming again, meeting youth where they are, creating more groups so where kids feel like they can belong, have a sense. That's what's lacking in communities all over, is a sense of belonging. And just giving them that, and let's get back to humanizing humans. Like we're human. We're gonna fall short.
Excellent point. The only thing I would say is to that is I think that as faith leaders, I think we all need to follow logic to its logical conclusion. If we all from the same community, and I'm a Muslim, you're a Christian, you're a Jew, or whatever organization, Hebrew Israelite or whatever, the thing is, all of our children are under the same condition. And when we see the commonality of the condition that we're faced with, that should be enough to bring us together to jointly seek solutions. And I think what happens to us in our community historically is when we divide ourselves, we also diminish our effectiveness, because there's no effectiveness in operating in silos. But when we come together, it'll blow your mind what you can get done when you come together. You know what I mean? So I think that's the problem, is that we don't see the commonality, but past the labels, we're stuck on the labels. We experienced that when we were marching. There were some great pastors who sent out brothers and sisters, and mostly brothers, because we asked for brothers. They came out, and then there were some pastors who didn't want to send their members because they felt like it was something that was led by the Muslims. And we were like, no, we're just the vehicle that God is using to make the call. But let's walk through the community. It's not about one organization. It's about the condition, because it's your grandson, my son, my nephew. We all from the same community. Forget about the distinction of the labels. And we did experience that. And I think a lot of times women don't have this problem too much. I can speak for men because I'm a man. And a lot of times our egos get in the way as men. And this is why we can't make the progress that we need to make. Because we all want to be the person to shoot the ball with 3 seconds left on the clock. I just want to be on a team that wins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who shoot the rock. I just want to win, and that's the thing.
Some women have that problem too. It's not just the.
Today, I can say when I ran for school board, so I came in first during the primary, and during the general, I came in last. And everybody's like, how do you feel coming last? I said, I didn't ask to come in at a specific spot. All I asked was for a seat at the table. Didn't matter where I came in at. I just wanted a seat at the table. So I think you're right. Going back to where you said, if more people, it didn't matter who's leading the charge. As long as you leading it and you're there, it shouldn't matter. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
I would also say that like building authentic relationships in the community, right? Like, and I think somebody in the panel already said it, like open your church, right? Do like an event that is not focused around converting people, right? Because like just let them come in the door, let them feel the spirit, let them feel the energy, and let that be the invitation to your church, right? Like you can't really approach this work thinking that you're going to save people, right? Like you have to find the commonalities, bridge the gaps, build the relationships, and then I'll go back to the word that was highlighted in the chat, building it organically. Like if you try to force something, it's not going to work. It's really and extend yourselves. Like find out what other organizations in the community, build collaborations. I mean, brother talked about, it don't always have to be all the Catholic churches, right, that are working together. Like build that community so that people see that this is not just about, you're not trying to convert people, you're not trying to get people, and if that happens, that's great, right? Like, you want to create that opportunity too, but it can't be just around that.
And I also want to add, I think it's kind of in line with what you're saying is like just listen. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to preach and like give the word or whatever, just start a conversation and listen to the kids. Like, and they'll tell you, if you sit there and listen, they'll talk to you. They'll open up. It doesn't have to be like a formal conversation or like it could just be like you talking to one kid or talking to a few kids, and listening to a few kids.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, I really resonate with that following the logic. Because let me tell you, I will say the one thing I'm learning from this generation of youth is that they're really smart and they catch they catch faith leaders up when they go, you're not being consistent with what you're teaching. And I think that that's one thing that's really great about the toolkit that Belinda was showing is that it's really asking churches and faith leaders and going, this is what you're saying about the Bible. This is what you're saying about God. And because of that, what are we going to do with this information? How are we going to advocate for the children in our communities? If we're going to love well, if we're going to lead with love, what does that actually mean for our actions, for our churches, and for how we're developing relationships? So yeah, that's just really good. And I appreciate, I think you already really touched on this, but I do think that there is a fear of becoming very paternalistic and like how faith leaders are working within their communities and especially, like coming in with a solution and all of the things like that. And so do you have any advice on how we can avoid, being very paternalistic, being authentic, being organic? I know that I can already say like we've already talked about like they really need to listen and that's a huge point. But any other advice?
Think that you have a great example in the prophets, and especially what we know of Jesus, peace be upon him. In a lot of his ministry, he just met the needs of the people. It looked like to me he was doing more healing and feeding than he was preaching. Based on what I read, unless I got a different Bible, I don't know, I might have a different one, but based on what I read in the Bible, the Quran, he looks like he was more focused on meeting the needs of the people. And I think when Lisette used the word organic, I mean, there could be nothing more organic than that, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And then when you're there meeting people's needs with no ulterior motive, the environment that I come from, because of the collateral damage of oppression, there's very few people you meet that's doing something for you. They ain't got an ulterior motive and it ain't no game attached to it. So when you meet somebody like that, that stands out and that becomes important and dear to you. Mm-hmm. So to meet somebody just come through and have no ulterior motive and say, hey, listen, I'm just doing, why are you doing this? Because it's just the right thing to do. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely going to get somebody's attention. That's definitely organic. That's definitely going to develop a relationship. Why? Because you're the one person or the second person that I met that generally cares about it. And that's important, And I think that's the way that faith organizations should lead, is follow the patterns of example that we already have in front of us in the scripture. We're looking for something out here, and over here it's right there on the pages.
I think everybody will be successful in life if we just operate in that way, just like in general. I just feel like just be authentic, be who you are, and I just feel like that's the way we as humans should operate. I just be who you are, just be organic. Organic relationships are so much, so much better. I just think, even in your personal life, even in your relationship with your spouse or significant other, being organic and not putting on a facade, is just so much healthier. So I agree, just what Liz said, it's just that organic, being real.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give a heads up for our audience. We're entering into the last like 15 minutes. So as you're, putting in, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Because I know that this has been so great. And so we really want to be able to hear what questions you all have. Yeah, I think going from what we just said, what are ways that church leaders could support the type of work you're doing, like the organizations. More so, not just like actually forming relationships, but like what does it look like for them to partner well with the organizations that you're working with?
I know
So
for
I'm
my
gonna
work.
do a shame. Okay, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead, Lisa. You go first.
No, you go first. You go first.
I'm gonna be short. So I know for my organization and like especially with the Hamden Youth Diversion Project, formerly the JRB, we have a panel. The youth attend a panel when they first come to the program, and the panel is made up of community volunteers. Like anyone that does restorative justice training that we provide can be a panel member, and we want people from that community to be on the panel, and the youth will meet with that panel and tell what happened, and the panel gets to ask some questions, and then they come up with some restorative recommendations that makes up whatever harm they did to themselves, the community, and their victim and their family. So we always recommend and encourage faith leaders in our community to be a part of that, and to be a part of the panel. So that's one way. There are juvenile review boards all around the country. It's or diversion programs of some kind, and oftentimes I know for the juvenile review board programs you can be a part of the panel, and I'm sure there are volunteer opportunities for other diversion programs as well.
I was gonna do a shameless plug for the kit, right? Like there is a toolkit that has been created that can give you a roadmap. So I would encourage you to use the toolkit. That's one. Two, I think it's about like reaching into the community. And I said this before, but like finding out who can be a good partner, right? Like, CCFY as an organization is committed to, partnering with faith-based organizations. Where is the CCFY in your community? Do that research. And if there isn't a CCFY in your community, start building relationships with the systems, right? Go to the probation officers, go to, the detention center, knock on their door and be like, we want to, provide support to, to your community. How can we help? Right? Because, people are not always going to come to you, right? Like people are not going to knock on your door and tell you, like what they need. So that if this is a real interest, with the church, with your church, is really trying to look to see who are your partners. So you will have to do some like inventory mapping and stuff like that. So yeah.
And I think I'm just speaking from a point of reference from the local community that I'm dealing with, where I'm from. I think that what I'm finding is it's all dealing with what is the motive, what is the niat, what is the intention. So if we try to get organizations to come out for the good of doing what is right, we notice when politics are involved, because organizations have something to gain, they'll come out when the mayor would use people's pain for political gain or profit. When they run, they'll go to these organizations. Somebody gets shot in the community and say, walk with me. And they'll walk with him. We come out and say, listen, we're not running for office. And this ain't campaign time. We love our people in the community. Come on out and walk with us, and let's just tell these brothers on the corner where it's going down that, hey man, we just came to tell you that we love you, brother. You need resources. You got some resources here. And a lot of times that's not happening because of sincerity of intention. So the best way for people to collaborate with us is keep your intentions pure. If you do that, we can come together and we can get more done, because people can say what they want to say. It's evident. My name is not Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles. I can see good. It's evident what I see is that if you don't come out with people that's down here grassroots doing this work, and you come out for political campaigning, and you allow somebody who doesn't live in your community to use you to march to get votes, but is not going to do anything about developing viable solutions to alleviate the problem of where you live, that's a problem. That's a problem.
So Mr. Dag, Mr. Knight, McKnight, I am, in the political ring with being on school board, and I absolutely can talk about this all day. It is something that, I hold our mayor accountable. And let's just be honest, race plays a big part. Let's just be honest. So I don't believe in when everyone wants to come together to have these rallies because someone has gotten shot. So everybody comes together. Community comes together, everybody wants to sit down. But then it fades away. So the last one I said to them, this is great. Love that I see this, but you're having it in the safest area of the district, the school auditorium. You're not going into the neighborhoods where the violence is happening at because you don't feel comfortable because you don't look like me. You don't so that's one of the biggest issues is you want to play it safe. So I hold my mayor accountable all the time. I don't just want to see you when little JoJo got shot. I want to see you before JoJo even gets shot. I want to see you out here giving back to these kids in this community before this even happens. And I represent a district that's made up of 5 communities. And I live in a district that my mayor doesn't look like me, but I should still see you at these youth events for these little kids that live within your community. So I believe in holding everybody accountable. My church, I knock and buck with my pastor all the time because stop just going to the kids, that's families that's represented here. Draw the families that are not represented here. Open the doors to these other families. There can be a great missionary person that's standing on the corner, but if nobody's going to go have that conversation with them, why would they come? How would you know? Stop just playing it safe. Sometimes when you got to do the work, you're going to have to get dirty. And you cannot always be scared. You just can't. You just have to go out there and just do the work. So yes, being in the political, I'm not a politician. I'm sorry, buddy. I just wanted to be a voice. Oh, I'm not a politician. No, I just wanted to be a voice. That's it. But definitely, it has allowed me to really see the true colors of how politics really work within the communities, especially in our Black and Brown communities. It's very sad, but I also put accountability back on the people that look like us. Because the people that look like us, we have a strong voice. You just don't realize how strong your voice is. Your voice is, I tell everybody, local politics is way more important than the presidential. People don't get that. Local politics play a significant role, but I can talk about that forever. I can go on that forever. But
unfortunately, our communities don't take advantage of local community politics, don't hold their city council, their assembly member. Let me tell you, I've considered myself to be a very educated person, but it wasn't until the last 3 years that I've really come to understand local community politics. And it's because I'm trying to pass a bill to bring my brother home, right? So that has forced me to learn something that I was never interested in because I'm not going to F with you. You know what I'm saying? Until I see that you are really doing something for my community. But on the same respect, if I don't hold you accountable, if I don't hold you to task, you could do whatever you want because ain't nobody going to say nothing. But we all know that in different communities, right, they hold their council member to task. So when they need that street light change, you be damn sure that street light going to be changed. You know what I'm saying? Our people be like, man, that street light been broken for years. Well, has anybody done anything about it? Right? Like, it's about retraining ourselves, and that's not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy. And let's also be clear, and I said this in the chat, I have a mayor that looks like me. That's not helping us much. You know what I'm saying? And we also have to be careful that just because they look like you don't mean that they have your best interests at heart either.
Oh no, because sometimes they haven't been affected the same way you have, so they don't get it. So because I have my superintendent, she's one of my great friends, And I have to tell her all the time, come from under that rock. These kids have been subjected to a lot of things that you didn't, and you've been fortunate that you look like us, but you haven't been subjected to a lot of the things that we have been. But you're right. I tell my mayor all the time, when a crime happens in a certain neck of the area, nobody knows for years. We had a crime happen in the park, next day, solved. Why? Because you have cameras. Then you put cameras on all the roads that you travel. Put the cameras in the heart of the community where you know that the violence is happening so that you can solve it just as you can solve a crime in the park. My car got hit in the park. This mayor was able to pull up on his phone, tell me the car who did it, what the boy, but you should have that same access in the community when these crimes are happening. That's a problem. But it's just, yeah, I can go on for days about.
No, I actually love this conversation. I'm really glad I did not plan to bring up local politics, but as someone who works in advocacy and thinks a lot about policy work, I will say that's one thing that's really tricky about specifically the juvenile justice space is the legislation and policy comes down to such a local level. It is different by state, it's different by city, it's different by district. So many of those elections really, really matter. And the pieces that's where like the voting is happening for policy. I know that's very true in Pennsylvania right now. There's so much going on. And so like thinking through that and understanding also that sometimes our calling to like help, and support families and children does mean being interested in local politics, which is, not what everyone wants to do. It's harder to find out all the information. It's harder to figure out who's running for things, what they stand for, but it's a worthwhile endeavor to know where you can be best involved and where you can use, for people who, faith leaders, again, they have a lot of influence. They especially have a lot of influence on politicians. And so using that power when they can, I think is really essential. So I'm very thankful that you brought this up, LaToya. I think this is a very worthwhile. I'm glad that you were angry about it and went for it because I'm so glad that it was discussed. I do want to get to some of these questions that were put in the chat so that we can talk about them. But the first one was, do any of y'all have any suggestions of some age level events that a church community can host for young people that would be helpful with diversion? Yes.
My answer to that was find a group of young people in your community, in your church that are leaders or have the potential and the capacity to be leaders and ask them.
Yeah.
Because the young people know what the young people want. Me as, a 53-year-old woman from the Bronx cannot tell you what activities to do in your community that are going to bring the young people out. Your community knows the answers. Tap into your community for the answers.
And I would just say that there was something that we were contemplating doing here in Bridgeport. We see the need for it, and actually the church and the faith community can actually collaborate with the school system. I don't know how it is in other areas, and I did go to school in New York when I lived in Brooklyn with my grandmother, and I got to tell you, the school system in New York was way better than the school system in Bridgeport. The kids are really suffering there. The scores are very, very low, almost on the level of when DC was at its lowest point, is where Bridgeport. You say Connecticut, and you like, that can't be, right? Come to Bridgeport, you'll see. But the point I'm making is that there is no career day where, because it's a lot of times in the churches and the mosques, there are a lot of male, and in particular Black and Latino male professionals. And a lot of times the most consistent male figure that a lot of young men see in impoverished communities is a young brother or another brother out there hustling. And where there's no vision, the people perish. So maybe we can get a panel of Black and Latino males together and go in and do a career day just to pique the interest of these young men. Because I know when I was in high school, I started getting to a certain grade level and my needs began to cloud my vision, what I thought was immediate needs, because I came from an environment that lost its ability to see delayed gratification, and it was about instant gratification because of oppression and exploitation. So that was taken from me. So I quit school and I graduated to the corner. And when people used to ask me, what you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be Dr. J, but I didn't grow no more. So that didn't work. So after that, it was like, that was my answer. I didn't even have a verbal answer. I didn't know what I wanted to be because I didn't see many consistent Black and Latino males in front of me that were talking to me and interacting with me about a career and whatnot. And I think that young men need that. I've talked to them. They said that it's very interesting. They really wonder what the realm of possibilities are for them. A lot of our women are slipping through the cracks, but our young men, we're suffering. And you see it in the population on college campuses. You see it when you measure the 11th and 12th grade. Young men are leaving school before the 11th or 12th grade. So I think churches and faith groups could play a major role in being instrumental in organizing that.
To follow up on that, we had actually done a collaboration with Hope for New York, which is an organization in New York City that brings together faith-based communities. And they had a team of volunteers that served as career mentors to our young people, right? So they volunteered themselves. So and then, we would talk to the young person and find out what their interests were and then try to match them. And that was really, really a great project that we did. And we actually did it during the pandemic. So we did it virtually. So it was a really cool exercise that we had done.
We have something going on. It's called #TheVillage. And it's made up of different adults, different leaders, different people within different communities going to different school districts and welcoming the kids in the morning and welcoming the kids as they come into school, greeting them and different things like that. So my first day of school, I was taking my daughter to school and it was this lady at the door. I said, "Oh, we got a new minority teacher. She's so vibrant. She's so," and they said, "Oh no, she's a superintendent over at Clareton, which is a community." I said, "Oh my goodness." So then I got to, I was like, "Oh, I'm a little sad, but I'm glad that they have someone like that that's welcoming in the morning. That energy is great." So I want to say that seeing it posted on social media allowed people and parents and other, just like, "Oh, how can I do it?" So a lot of teenagers wish they had that when they were going to school in the morning, when they were having bad days. So now you have a lot of teenagers that want to do it. So when's the next welcome in the morning over in Duquesne or this area or that school district? So that's something that's helped more young people get involved, was like welcoming the other kids or other teenagers to school in the morning because they just didn't have that. So then we have a youth pastor who was he's very big in this initiative, very, very big. And so he has Monday night church. Sometimes kids don't want to go to church on Sunday morning. Sometimes kids just don't want to get up in the morning. So he has a Monday night, and he has so many, from young adults to adults that now are, want to go hear him preach. And our church also do something where we have youth revival during Thanksgiving week, where a young pastor comes in and he preaches, and he doesn't preach he just preaches to them about life. I would say talk to them about life and just growing up and the do's and the don'ts and just where life may lead you. But that has also drawn in a lot of youth. So those are two things that, and within the community that I see have gotten more participation.
That is fantastic. I also really love that idea. And I'm like, I want to be a greeter at a school in the morning. So that's fantastic. I know we're running low on time, but I did want to ask this one last question because I think it's really important. Sarah asked, do you think some of the people fighting prison abuses enables drug dealers to target young people? If so, how can the good goals be met without letting bad people get away with hurting communities and kids on purpose?
Somebody was going to take that for me? Go ahead, I'll wait for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You got it.
No, I say that that's a good question. And I think that a lot of times you see this question in the media whenever something is done to peel back, to get tough on crime. decades of Get Tough on Crime that was really targeting people of color. Whenever these things are peeled back, when the negative happens, people immediately go to blaming that, well, they're being soft on crime. I've worked in reentry for years, and I would say this: if people really want to get down to a real solution, I'm all about reentry. Prison reform, I think, is good, but it's not good if we lose focus on reforming the human being because of the collateral damage of exploitation and oppression that people, end up resorting to crime to find a way to get their daily bread. Because this is what it's about. So follow logic to its logical conclusion. Then instead of working on the back end, we need to find a way on the front end to create resources and opportunities for people in impoverished communities. So you can't peel back laws that are unjust and then point the finger when somebody does something out of pocket. I mean, it's like Malcolm said, they'll break your wings and accuse you of not being able to fly. I mean, this is real stuff here. I mean, people are not just popping up out the ground saying, I'm going to commit a crime. This is a process that's producing this kind of behavior from certain elements in the community that are a direct result of oppression. So I think that to balance that with prison reform, there also has to be a focus on human reform that don't just make prison more comfortable. Yes, make it more humane, but also make sure that there's enough programming in there to get people to be able to tap into their original nature and get rid of the facade that they've been living under as a result of oppression. So that's my thing. I don't see a balance. And a lot of times this is happening because you got people who are not allowing people like me to step to the microphone. So people want to do good and they're saying, hey, we're promoting prison reform. Well, why don't you let somebody come up to the microphone that can tell you what needs to be changed and what worked for them and what is more needed in terms of changing human beings. You can't give people iPads and 5 free phone calls a day and methadone in prison, and then you don't have some kind of enforcement that people should get an education. There's no way you let a person come to prison with no high school diploma or GED, and they do 10 years, and you let them leave prison without that. If you put them in segregation for disobeying a direct order, why you can't put that much energy into them getting an education to get access to the tools they're going to need to navigate a successful reentry? The whole thing has to be re-looked at and re-examined. So I think extreme prison reform without the balance of programming that reforms human beings, that's what's wrong. But you can't take one incident in the media and say peel back all the prison reform because it's not working, because it got nothing to do with it. It's
And
nothing. I hope that answered your question.
I would also say, I hope I'm not stepping in front of anyone, but really quick, like this is why credible messengers and people with lived experience, like you, are really important, because like I know that the guys I work with, like if a situation happens where a drug dealer is using a young person to sell drugs, they're gonna talk to that person because they're gonna know that person, because that person is part of their community. And they're gonna tell them, fall back. That's not, don't do that or whatever. And they'll have the respect in the community to be able to do that. So yeah.
And to piggyback also, like the prison reform isn't what's causing the problem. You know what I'm saying? What's causing the problem of the communities are under resourced. There's not enough education. There's, people are dealing with poverty. They're dealing with like basic survival skills that are not being met in our communities, that are unfortunately forcing people to go, find the resources themselves, and not in the most positive ways. So, prison reform is not the problem. It's under-resourced communities who don't have everything they need to take care of their people.
Yeah,
Hey,
and to touch
if
back,
I could I just wanted to add one thing. I apologize to give a whole clear picture. Like Lisette was saying, and I'm sorry, Latoya. Like Lisette was saying, also what I noticed, I'm just giving you my observation. Another thing that's contributing to this is there is a silent protest going on in America that a lot of you may not see. But ever since the vocal protests of Black Lives Matter, there has been a resistant protest by certain elements, not all. There are good people in the police department. Certain elements of the police department, there has been a attitude of apathy. And what's happening is, lately, since this has been going down, you don't see it. You got to have an eye to see it. There's a lack of visibility, and all this stuff is done on purpose. There's a lack of responding on time to calls, and they're allowing the community to become more dangerous, to say, hey, see, this is why you need us. I know you might think I'm crazy for saying this, but I know what I see. And all this stuff is by design.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I was going to add is we've been fortunate for our foundation is to have a pod within our county jail. So we have a pod that, you know, you can come to and you graduate from that pod. And we also have a pre-release program within our county jail as well. But where we're falling short is once they're released, that bridge of catching them, that gap right there, because we can tell them, hey, we have this aftercare program that you can go to that's still a part of the same foundation, but how many people are really giving them? So we're working on trying to create a transitional person from when they're, you know, when they're in the pre-release program and they leave the pods, and when they actually get out, making sure that they get the resources that they need, because that's where we believe that's where we're missing some of the people at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hate to like cut off a great discussion, but we are running out of time. Thank you so much for all of the things that you added and how you answered those questions. I will also do another shameless plug for the toolkit, because this is one of those questions that's often asked in churches of just people who are very well intentioned, saying like, hey, I want to make sure that there's not more crime happening because we're getting rid of prisons, or, you know, these different things are happening. And it gives some of these good kind of feedback of how do you answer these hard conversations, and how do you answer some of these hard questions and have real, honest conversations. So make sure that you check out our toolkit. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to all of our panelists, but then also to our funding partner. This would be impossible without the Annie E. Casey Foundation and the work they do to make sure that communities do have the resources and the knowledge that they need. I would also like to thank Community Connections for Youth for partnering with us to make this toolkit. Ruben and Belinda especially. And then, of course, thank our communications director at the Center for Public Justice, Deborah, for all the work she does to make this event happen and to be able to have these conversations. Please continue to follow the Center for Public Justice. We are constantly looking for ways that we can connect faith leaders and faith communities to doing important policy reform work and protecting children and their families. So I would love to welcome Pastor Greg back to close us in prayer.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody's heart, hearing everybody's heart. It's been amazing today. And so I'm just going to close us in prayer. According to Matthew chapter 10, Jesus gave a description where he says, even if you give a cup of cold water to a child, that you will not lose a reward. And sometimes we struggle with what counts or what makes a difference. But Father, I just thank you as we come in the name of Jesus. And I thank you for the blessings for each and every one that's on this Zoom meeting here today, that are giving, spending their time, stepping up, being there for people behind where no one else sees, God. But I just thank you for your word that says there is rewards that come as something as small as giving water to a child. God, I just thank you for those rewards, the rewards of seeing the difference, the rewards of lives being changed, family trees being grafted out of where they would have been, futures being able to be changed because of the hearts, the lives of people that are giving of their time, their heart, their resources. Lord, we just thank you. Lord, everything that we do for your honor, for your glory, Lord, for your heart. We thank you for what you've done in our hearts, Lord, and we just count it such an awesome honor to be able to release and give back to others. And I just thank you for your blessings and rewards on each and every person, their heart, Lord, and times, Lord, just for that encouragement, God, that everybody's doing incredible, exceptional, and that everything that we do to make heaven proud. In Jesus' name, Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so much. And I hope you go on to have a blessed day. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Center for Public Justice and we can see how we can connect you to more resources.